Welcome to the place where your dreams come true, Dream World. This game is currently the most popular game on the web and the most trending game. The number one player, the most famous game in all categories, meet Dream World. This is a national game that everyone has played at least once, including actors, bloggers, politicians, and others. No matter who you are, you can meet players of all ages and nationalities here. The dark-haired guy creates his character in the game for the first time without thinking twice. The player calls himself Carl. In Dream World, you can make your dreams come true. Cadence Cook created a character as similar to himself as possible. The main character was completely immersed in the game. He could play it for weeks without leaving the house. Becoming number one, which no one can surpass. This is the goal that Cadence has set for himself. And after thousands of hours spent in Dream World, he has made his dream come true. Cook took the first position in the rating, but the game channel was closed and the world forgot about Dream World for a long time. Today is the release day of Dream World 2. The channel was created again, but there was one oddity. The game indicated that the game character is on the ground. Half an hour ago, Cadence, as usual, finished express delivery and was pressing the button to select a username for pre-ordering Dream World 2. Suddenly, the elevator stopped so abruptly that the main character lost his balance. The light went out, and there was silence. Cook desperately tried to contact the dispatcher, but the emergency call button was not working, and 911 could not be reached. While the young man was waiting for help, or until someone noticed that the elevator was not working, a scoreboard from the game appeared in front of the guy. Cadence couldn't figure out how it worked. Maybe it was a hologram. The board seemed to exist in the real world. There was a button clearly visible on the screen that clearly demanded to be pressed, and such an avid gamer as Cook could not help but press it. Upon confirmation, the information on the board was updated and the guy had his first task, which said that parasites would soon attack the elevator and he needed to escape from the closed space. In case of failure of the task, the main character is threatened with death. Suddenly, the elevator was filled with a swarm of cockroaches. They crawled out of all corners. Cook's scream filled the entire building. Cockroaches were everywhere. They were trying to crawl under clothes and into ears. We had to get out urgently. There were 13 seconds left until the end of the task. The main character completed his task and was able to leave the crowded elevator. There was a portal behind Cadence, but it didn't look like the cockroaches came from there, so why the portal? Apparently, this is a portal that I open when I exit the game. Maybe the guy started to think that he was going crazy because of the sudden closure of the game, and he started to have withdrawal symptoms. Suddenly, unclear sounds began to come from the portal, causing the protagonist to panic. There were too many questions and so few answers. A green monster, similar to a goblin, jumped out of the portal. The monster clearly wanted to attack Cook. This can't happen in reality. The young man began to think that he was hallucinating. The goblin struck the boy. He reflexively gave in, covering his head. A scream of pain escaped Cadence's mouth. The monster's blow was real, moreover. Cook received damage from the goblin's attack. His health began to decrease. You need to run. But what if the goblin continues to attack? There is very little health left. One blow could be the last. The green monster was preparing to attack the main character again. Cadence was in a panic. The goblin opened his nasty mouth. The guy was sure that he would die, and that would be the end of his worthless life. For a second, the panic subsided. The monster was quite small, although it appeared spectacularly. I needed to pull myself together. Cook was distracted, and the goblin struck again. But the guy managed to jump back. One blow and he was finished. He needed to run. Cadence saw a staircase. If he ran down it and hid on another floor, then maybe he could escape. The information board blocked the exit to the stairs. Cook was undergoing training and could not leave the floor. The exit is blocked. There is nowhere to run. All that remains is to either pull yourself together and fight or die. During this time, the goblin managed to swing and throw his wooden hammer with all his might at the main character. The monster's weapon flew into the wall, right next to Cadence, death breathing down the protagonist's back. The guy had already resigned himself to the fact that the end had come for him. Maybe it was just a bad dream. In the morning, he would wake up after a hard night and go to work. Suddenly, a notification popped up about a reward for disabling the server. The player's level is not high enough for them. Changes have been made. Cook's body calmed down. There was no more panic. It was the new ability he had just received that was working. The goblin prepared to attack his opponent again. He no longer looked as scary as he had seemed before. Cadence took his sword. It was a normal monster from a F-rank dungeon. If this was happening in Dreamworld, the hero would have simply ignored it. This means that the chance of Cook losing is zero. His health will not drop below a certain level. The goblin is attacking. The guy thought that he initially had an advantage against the monster. It is impossible to die during training. The monster, preparing to strike, decided to jump so that it could inflict more damage. At that moment, Cadence cold-bloodedly pierced his opponent with his sword. It turned out it was that easy. The hammer fell from the hands of the monster. If this is like in the game, then there should be at least 5 goblins here. Cook wondered if he could handle it if one goblin had caused him so much fear, if he could defeat several more of the same kind. What kind of stupid thoughts are these? The main character must cope, no matter how many opponents there are. The main thing is to act calmly, dexterously, and quickly. The guy mentally prepared for the battle, took his sword and stood waiting for the enemies. They should get a little closer. With a deft movement of his weapon, Cadence quickly dealt with all the goblins, the task completed. All the monsters on the 13th floor were destroyed, and the main character received the title of an evil killer. The task turned out to be much easier than it initially seemed. Cook received tattered rags from the slain goblins. This is really a game. But everything happens in reality. Today is the release day of Dreamworld 2. Cadence wondered why he was so calm then. It was probably because of the upgrade he got from the bonus. It remains to be seen whether the main character got into the game or the game became reality. The player decided to check the scoreboard. Since his level is low, only partial use of the celestial body is available. The calm skill is activated. Cook didn't understand why he got a skill that took him months to earn last time. Maybe this is the reward for shutting down the server. Dreamworld was another popular game. The reason for its failure was its incredible difficulty. Previously, you had to type a command every time you used a spell, which slowed down its use. Many players left because they couldn't get used to the mechanics of the game, because only true fans could handle it. But the main reason why the game was considered crap was the 3 lives. If you die 3 times, the character is deleted. That's why there were so few cool players and a huge difference between rankers. Those who entered the top 12 were not considered people. Users called them gods. Also known as those above the sky, they have started over many times, and despite the difficulty of the game, they have become the strongest. Ranker number 1 was a character named K, or Cadence Cook. The guy knew all the tricks of the game like the back of his hand. He had started over thousands of times. But 5 years later, the server was shut down and a survey appeared on the main page. We had to pick 3 things that players would like to carry over to Dreamworld 2, and that was the end of the first Dreamworld. However, no one could have thought that the second version of the game would be in such a format. No one expected to receive a reward for disabling it like this. Cadence began to scold himself. If he had known that this would happen, he would have chosen a mystical item. The celestial body has allowed adaptation to battles. At the moment, the skill can be used partially. Related skills are limited. It's no surprise that the sword fit naturally into his hand. And most importantly, Cook began to feel something he hadn't felt in the game before. The body was affected by the calmness from the celestial body, which means the other 2 skills will also be received as a reward. A new task has appeared. A rank F dungeon has begun to transform. You need to survive 5 to 6 waves during which the dungeon is created. The time for the task is 10 minutes. In case of failure, death is threatened. The monster appeared in Block 103. As the player goes through the tutorial, the monster's level is adapted. The goblin boss has already passed through the portal. Cadence needs to fight the enemy and defeat him. A slight earthquake began to shake the living building, and the electricity began to work intermittently. The girl was getting ready to go to school. She felt light tremors as she thought. An earthquake. But this was a dungeon that was being created, and on this day, the girl was not destined to reach school alive. A huge goblin stood in the way of a schoolgirl. She had never seen such monsters before and had no idea what to do. Goblins began to appear all over the house, in apartments, corridors. People were not ready for such a catastrophe. Residents of the building ran out of their apartments in search of salvation, but the monsters were everywhere. There was nowhere to hide. A familiar sound was heard everywhere. It had already begun. It was time to start completing the task. Everything is very bad. If it is like in the game, Cook realized that goblins began to appear everywhere. Many people will die. Dungeon is a phenomenon where a normal area is overrun by hordes of monsters. That was the concept of Dreamworld. People who are not players will not be able to fight. The monsters can't leave their floors. If the guy can escape, he can clear them out. To get to another building, you need to get to the roof. Only one ranker can save everyone. We need to wait with the roof and stay here to clear this dungeon. Even when trained, the boss doesn't like light, which means he hides in the basement. The only way out is to get to him in 10 minutes. There was a strange sound from behind. The main character turned around to see a portal had appeared there. The dark blue portal attracted great interest from the player. It beckoned him to come to it. Most likely, this is because the monster infestation has stopped. Cook will definitely cope with everything. He has no other choice. He activated the calmness skill. The guy confidently walked towards the unknown and plunged into the portal. The main character found himself in a room with a secret infected seed of nature, which was located in a parking lot. This was pretty much how Cadence had imagined the place, but he hoped that something would change in the second part. There were goblins wandering around the parking lot. It looks like the player hid behind a pole before the monsters noticed him. Apparently, the goblins get up through portals. In order to save people, they need to be blocked. To do this, you need to kill the boss. Finding the green giant was not difficult. In reality, he's really fucking huge. He looks more like the one they showed in the movies. The giant goblin had not yet noticed the player and was wandering aimlessly around the parking lot. Until the dungeon is finished, this place has not become a full-fledged dungeon. In training, until the process is completed, raids are carried out using different tactics. Cook waited for the time to attack the boss. The timer should drop to 1 minute. Then the monsters get a reduction in breathing and the battle can begin. An icon appeared above the boss, indicating that he needed to be attacked. Cook confidently delivered the first blow, the reduction in breathing occurring at the last minute before the formation of the dungeon. The player has activated the calm skill. He cannot panic now. At the last moment before the end of the dungeon, all monsters begin to breathe harder. The monster that has become the boss stops. Many players took advantage of this and increased their level in this way. The protagonist wasn't sure if this was applicable to the current situation, but there was no other option. First, you need to disorient the small goblins. You need to choose a higher place. The player climbed up and hid behind an overturned car. The monsters lost sight of the enemy and began to search for him. Cook received the title of a cowardly killer. The monster's fury increased. Because of this, the goblin's ability to assess the situation weakened. It is necessary to equip yourself in advance. The main character came up with a plan of action. However, the player lost his guard. The boss approached too quietly from behind and struck. Cadence managed to dodge. It seemed the huge goblin's breathing contraction had ended. Taking a closer look, the protagonist realized that the boss was moving forcibly. Before he can move again, Cook must finish off the enemy. Cook defeated the boss with one blow, and he managed to take advantage of the situation in time. The goblin's head fell to the parking lot floor, training successfully completed. The weather forecast on the radio indicated that cloudiness and a high concentration of fine dust were expected over most of the country. In densely populated cities, there is a strong wind and thick fog in the morning. Due to the high concentration of dust, the presenter recommends that residents of the country stay at home. A morning that should have been like any other. Today was different. A catastrophe befell the entire country. It was as if an apocalypse had passed through the streets. Just 10 minutes changed everything. The incident happened around 6 in the morning. Starting in Seoul, the center of Korea, it later spread across the country in an instant. Because of this, the internet exploded. All news channels were filled with information, but all media were removed. The townspeople, who did not fully believe and were in doubt, only talked about the situation that had happened. In the dressing room, the girl recognized the graphics of the game. It was clearly Dreamworld. Emily Gibbs, a popular idol, watched the videos from the scene of the incidents closely. The girl realized that the dungeon had really begun. Gibbs is the best singer and songwriter in the country. She is called an idol. She is a worldwide star who appears in commercials, dramas, and movies. However, Emily, a sweet and innocent girl, has one secret. Suddenly, the process was interrupted by a producer who burst into the dressing room. He said with alarm that all their plans for today were canceled and that they needed to return to the dorm immediately. Emily jumped up and showed the man a live feed of a lizard attacking people. The broadcast is conducted from the Namsan Tower, after which the girl showed a red wyvern in the middle of the city. The producer tried to calm a worried Gibbs, but she insisted that Dreamworld had become a reality. The man was sure that the singer was addicted to games and decided to confiscate the phone. Emily's secret was that she was a Dreamworld player, the one above the sky. This means that she is one of the 12 that all players looked up to. Among them, the best player who could freely use weapons was a rank 12 magic shooter. Even fans didn't know about the girl's hobby, so that the idol wouldn't be recognized. she used a voice filter. Gibbs also chose a middle-aged man as her character. But once the game became reality, there was no need to hide her identity. However, the producer took the phone away and put it in his backpack. He didn't want to hear anything about Dreamworld. He claimed that the director could send the girl to rehab. The man just wanted to save her reputation. Gibbs asked her to listen, but an earthquake began and everything around began to fall to the floor. The gamer took advantage of the opportunity and snatched the producer's phone. They say that if you link your phone to your account, you can access items and abilities just like in the game. The girl first tried to log into her account. She asked the man not to move. Emily Gibbs logged in, gained access to the account, and became a character in the game. The producer was shocked. He was sure that the girl had simply made it all up, but the game became reality. As a reward for connecting, you now have the opportunity to equip a magic revolver. From out of nowhere, a real weapon fell right into Emily's hands, just like in the game. While the gamer was admiring her brand new revolver, a portal opened behind her. A nasty monster, similar to a ghoul, immediately began to crawl out of it. The heroine was delighted. The monster in life is more vile than in the game. Deciding to try out the weapon, Gibbs pointed the revolver at the monster. One shot would be enough for such a weakling. But the shot did not happen. The drum was empty, and cold sweat began to run down his face. Emily was puzzled. Was the gun not real? Why didn't it fire? The board showed that synchronization was taking place. You need to wait. The monster was ready to strike. It was very close to the gamer. I had to dodge the ghoul's attacks and run away until the revolver loaded. Slow phone loading almost caused the heroine's death. Running away from the monster, she managed to gain some time, and finally, the girl confidently stopped and shot at him. The ghoul's body fell to the floor. The producer couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't understand what was happening and asked the idol for an explanation. Emily said that the man needed to run away urgently. Now everyone is on their own, and she needs to find one person. Cadence stood in the underground parking lot and looked at the dead boss. The infected tree of nature failed the dungeon. The guy coped with his task. The monster's body began to bubble, and then dissolved into the air and flew upward like a whirlwind. The monster disappeared, but all the damage to the building and the blood remained. After completing the task, a new portal appeared. Apparently, the second stage had begun. The training task is a labyrinth of choice, in which you need to go through each stage of the selected difficulty. This is the final part of the training where the reward will be ability. It didn't end and went back to the beginning because the protagonist stopped the dungeon. This means that I need to go through the training again. Everything is too easy for now. After passing through the portal, the player found himself in a dimly lit room. This place is real, just like the map from the Dreamworld tutorial in the first part. The guy can smell the surroundings and the temperature. This amazed him. The training began. Light sources appeared behind him. Cadence turned around to look. In front of the main character, there are 4 portals, a labyrinth of choice. The final step of the tutorial, after which the player is awarded an ability depending on the level they choose. Even if the ability is the same, for completing the easy difficulty it will be F rank, and on the hell difficulty it will be A rank. Cook usually chose the hell difficulty. The problem is that it is set in such a way that it is impossible to pass. But there was one player who was able to pass the hellish difficulty, but now the circumstances are different. The scoreboard showed the number of players on each level. 120 were trying to get through on hellish difficulty. The very fact that so many people are undergoing training means that this phenomenon is occurring over a large area. Perhaps not only in Korea, but all over the world. Dreamworld has become a reality all over the planet. Many people died. Cook mentally asked the inhabitants of the planet to hold on. Cadence must worry about himself first and others second. In the end, the player still chose the hellish difficulty level. Level 1, the task is to protect the goddess statue from golems in a limited space for 5 minutes. If Cook fails, he will die. The time limit only exists in hell difficulty. Stone golems started crawling out from everywhere, but for now they can only crawl. After the monsters loaded up, they stood up and began to float in the air. The player began to fight. The golems turned out to be weaker than he expected. The main character deftly cut through the stone flesh of the monsters. It came easy to the guy. The monsters were scattered all over the training area. Perhaps it is all because of the ability of the celestial body, a surprisingly easy task. But the problems are just beginning. The oxygen level in the dome is decreasing. The golems are becoming more active. Character reaction time decreased by 0.5 seconds. monster speed and strength increased by 5%. In proportion to the remaining time, the player's movement becomes slower and the monsters become stronger. Reaction time slowed by 1 second, and monster speed and strength increased by 10%, time remaining 3 minutes. At this level, the guy needs to predict the golem's movements in advance. The true horror of hellish complexity will appear now. Is there any point in risking learning? The player decided that there was a point, all for the sake of a secret mission that only exists on hellish difficulty. From the destroyed monsters, one boss golem was assembled. This is the secret task. The monster turned out to be very noisy. The guy had to cover his ears. The secret mission can give you an upgrade that is not available on other difficulties. The boss tried to step on the player, but Cook managed to jump away. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the protagonist struck the golem with his sword. However, the monster's skin turned out to be much stronger than the character expected, and his sword was damaged more than the boss. The fight is going hard. Cadence will be able to get the reward only when the phase is over. All he can do now is change his equipment. The player put away the rough sword and took up the corrupted hammer of physical damage. Now the fight can be started over again. Such a weapon will clearly give more damage. With 1.5 minutes left to hold out, Cook rushed into the attack. He swung his hammer. This time, the boss took more damage, and a plan appeared in the guy's head. Dodging the attacks, Cadence struck the golem again and again. Due to such high speed, the stone monster did not have time to dodge the attacks. This is a tutorial monster, so it's easy enough to just chip away at its health. The golem's weak point is the core on its stomach. You need to aim there. However, the stone is too high, you need to somehow reach it. It's not like in the game, the character can't jump that high. If you can't climb up, you need to force the boss to go down. Cadence used a spinning kick to hit the golem's legs, making it shorter in height. The main character dealt blow after blow. Parts of the boss flew in different directions. Finally, the monster, deprived of balance and support, fell to the floor. The player then jumped as high as he could to deliver the finishing blow. This is the end for the stone monster. His life stone shattered into pieces. The golem's eyes went dark. Cadence had done his job perfectly. The monster of unknown rank was defeated. The first stage of training was completed. There are still 39 seconds left. The guy saved a lot of time thanks to this hammer. The protagonist received a hidden reward for completing the first stage of training, A-rank stamina. The Dragon Eye skill was unlocked, and the guy also received a huge amount of health. But this is only the first stage of training from a huge number. Even in the real dream world, the character had to undergo training for a whole month. In the middle of the forest, Cadence was killing slimes. They were very easy to kill. With the Dragon's Eye, the protagonist could see his enemies, even if they were hiding. The guy likes the Hell level and his Dragon Eye skill too much. Cook looked around carefully, saw the enemy, and threw his weapon into the void. He hit the target right on target, a monster whose appearance was hidden from the ordinary human eye. The Dragon's Eye allows the user to see the flow of mana, making it impossible to hide from the guy. Another hidden task was completed. The hidden stage opened due to the completion of the hidden task. The boss appeared. The woman called the player a fool. He could have lived on. If he had just left and pretended not to see her, she would have spared him. The boss also noted that Cook's arrogance led to his death. While the monster was crucifying himself before the man, he managed to slip away. The situation turned out to be completely different. The boss's arrogance led to her death. Cadence wasted no time as he began his attack while the monster was speaking. And then, taking advantage of the opportunity, he cut her in two. It was too easy. The boss tried to justify herself. If it were her real body, the person would already be dead. However, the guy is no longer the same as he was at the beginning of the training. He advised the boss to return to his body and wait for him. Cadence completed all stages of training and received awards for his training. In 5 seconds, the player will be transferred. He has been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The main character passed through the portal. Cook decided to check how much time he spent studying. 3 months have passed. He didn't think he would disappear for so long. First, he needs to find survivors here. First, we need to assess the situation. This happened in a high school in Seoul. The players were in a panic. No one wanted to go fight the monsters. They were sure that they would all die if they stayed here. The policeman confirmed the guy's words. There was no more time to wait. They had 1 day left. Orson Marshman, police officer, one of the players couldn't take it anymore. Didn't the officer understand that the game had become real? Everyone has only one life. Everyone can die. But Orson calmed the guy down. The officer is also scared. However, players must go into the dungeon, otherwise a rift will soon occur. This is a phenomenon in which the number of monsters in a dungeon rapidly increases and they emerge from it. When a rift occurs, the portal turns red and the dungeon's rank begins to slowly increase. The problem is that people here are not capable of dealing with such complexity. If the dungeon's rank rises to D, there will be no more chance. If the rift happens again, no one will survive it. The dungeon is pumped at an incredible speed. It's all because the monsters here are the undead, most often zombies. Unlike other monsters, a zombie bite infects instantly, and what's more, they can turn others like themselves into zombies. Even corpses can turn into zombies. Other dungeons in this area are still F rank. The players are now at a school that was once a dungeon. The innocent children who studied here were left helpless in the face of the attacks of the dead. The squad has already lost many, families, loved ones, friends, but we must fight. Fight to protect the home and those who can still be protected from monsters. And most importantly, we need to save ourselves from the changed world. We need to preserve what remains at any cost. Marshman called on everyone to fight. In this world, the dungeons are not homework, but a disaster. The policeman understands perfectly well that his plan is crazy, but he must take care of the survival of people. The team went to clear an E-rank dungeon. The participants did not know whether they would return home alive. Although the squad doesn't have a good ranker, they do have Emily Gibbs, an excellent marksman. The squad leader inspired his comrades to go fight the monsters. Life in the world will never be the same again. The streets are in complete disarray. Cars have been abandoned by their owners. The building is filled with corpses. Many people were killed in their apartments. Cadence closed the eyes of a little boy who fell during the monster invasion. You need to find living players, group up, it will be easier to survive in this world. After leaving the apartment, Cook found a portal to the dungeon near the school. The red portal is the most dangerous. The color of the portal reflects the state of the dungeon. Blue is easy, green is normal. After the red dungeon is broken, the portal will turn black. There were 24 hours left until the rift. While the guy was looking around, there were 22 hours left until the rift. In the game, when time before the rift begins to accelerate, monsters appear frequently and in large numbers. At such moments, entire settlements are destroyed. If it is the same here as in the game, then a rift will soon occur. In that case, the people in the dungeon won't last long. We still need to figure out why the time count suddenly started to speed up. The structure of the dungeon changes depending on the level. There is nothing remarkable about the F-rank ones, but the E-rank ones make objects inside themselves several times larger than a person. Cadence found himself in an empty classroom. The phenomenon where items inside a dungeon grow larger is called expansion. The player's level is low, and he cannot let his guard down. A reanimated skeleton appeared. Level 40, he is possessed by a cursed spirit. Looking straight out of a horror movie, Cook chose a sturdy sword. The skeleton looked at the main character with his soulless eyes. The monster rushed to attack the main character. Cadence was completely calm. The player quickly dealt with the skeleton, cutting it down with his sword. To defeat the monster, you need to find its core. Its weak point is the neck. You need to get rid of the spirit in it. Once discovered, the monster must be cut down, and when the skeleton cannot resist, it must be dealt with once and for all. Namely, splitting the core, thereby killing the skeleton. In fact, it is not difficult to deal with this monster. Cadence's level has increased. He hasn't heard this sound for 100 years. At the beginning of training, it sounds more often. But due to the max level, Cook hadn't heard from him since he reached level 30. It was worth being surprised that there was only one skeleton, but others appeared. The main character received many titles on this floor. After some time, the player found a mountain of dead skeletons. Someone must have come here earlier. I'll have to put off leveling and find the people fighting in this dungeon. At this time, there were fierce battles with the police detachment. There were too many skeletons. Monsters were attacking people from all sides. Something strange was happening here. An hour ago, things were going very well. The squad was coping with its task. The players acted in a coordinated manner. Even the weakest ones were able to fight. Thanks to Emily, the team had no casualties. She did an excellent job of covering those who did not see the approaching danger. There was no sign of trouble, but suddenly there was an explosion, and many were injured. The squad didn't even understand from which side the explosion occurred. They needed to disperse. Things are bad. Orson noticed two people dressed in green cloaks above. They were clearly involved in the explosion. It must be impossible, players, for monsters of this level to appear in an E-rank dungeon. First, we need to get the people out of here. The squad needs to get out of the spell's reach. The players are targeting the strongest player in the group. They must have some kind of plan. Marshman tried to come up with a plan of action. No one expected this in the dungeon. A player appeared next to the policeman. He mocked the commander's cowardice. Orson tried to strike the enemy, but he deftly dodged the attack. The player reported that they were left alone. The enemy clearly knew the detective. The policeman couldn't believe who the man was. He clearly didn't recognize him. The enemy became disillusioned with the detective and was preparing to strike. Another explosion occurred, tongues of flame scorching Orson's body. The man managed to dodge the stranger's blow. The enemy is playing with him. The masked player laughed and compared Marshman to a cockroach. Wave Rider's spear, this is a reward for server shutdown, but it has a level limit. At least its power alone makes it effective. We need to hurt this player. No matter what his level is, his skills show that he is a high-level fighter. However, no matter how strong the opponent was, he would not use the explosion on himself. The detective took advantage of the opportunity and attacked the attacker. The masked player knew Marshman's moves in advance. He is too predictable. And again, there was an explosion, and this time the policeman's body was engulfed in flames. The shockwave sent him flying into the wall, and Orson received a strong blow. The detective is powerless against the masked player. He still hasn't figured out what kind of person he is. The stranger came closer. He noted that Marshman had lost his sense of smell since their last meeting. Memories surfaced in the policeman's mind. Several years ago, he caught a murderer. He brutally killed one woman, and Orson finally realized who was standing in front of him. The criminal took off his mask, and now he believes that he can deal with the detective for putting him in jail. The player had been waiting for this opportunity for too long, and then suddenly such luck came his way. Louis Adrian, a notorious serial killer, escaped from prison when Dreamworld became a reality. The criminal was sentenced to death, a demon who killed 7 people. So everyone who is with him now, his cellmates, this is the worst-case scenario. The detective couldn't believe that such a monster had the right to become a player. Louis reminded that all of Orson's partners were dead, and no one would come to save him. Adrian's cellmates had probably already finished off all of the man's remaining comrades. Just as the criminal was about to finish off the policeman, an explosion occurred. Someone broke through the wall of the room, but this was clearly not in the attacker's plans. Cadence has finally found more players. Now he can figure out what's going on in the dungeon. However, the guy quickly realized that something was wrong here. Were the players really fighting each other? Louis was puzzled by the appearance of another person on the battlefield. Marshman warned the player to run. Whoever the new participant in the fight was, he shouldn't have interrupted Adrian. He decided to blow up the player. Orson had already lost hope when suddenly the young man emerged from the fire unharmed. Cook used the dragon's eye. He realized that the masked man was involved in the explosion. Compared to the maze of choices, the criminal will be easy to deal with. The masked man decided that he wouldn't miss this time, but the player deftly avoided the explosion. Cadence quickly realized that the masked man was a red player. This is a person who constantly kills other players. In Dreamworld, there are only 3 lives, so such people were considered villains. Even the developers perceived them as a cancerous tumor. At one time, a guy almost failed a raid because of one of them. Red players must be killed immediately, running past the corpses. Cook realized that they did not die from monsters. They were clearly killed by a man in a mask. Maybe he was also involved in the acceleration of time. The criminal wanted to bribe the guy and promised that he would let him go, but Marshman warned that the player was facing a serial killer. Cadence heard the maniac's name on the news, so it's even more interesting. The hero doesn't intend to leave the man alive. The character activated the dragon's eye and eliminated the hidden danger. He removed the stealth from the second masked man and decapitated the criminal with one blow. Louis didn't expect his ally to be killed so quickly. The guy informed the red player that his time had come. It's time for the serial killer to take responsibility for all the crimes he committed. Cook changed his sword for another weapon and accurately threw it at the attacker. Throwing the isolation skill on top of this increases the safety a bit. Player Louis Adrian died. The guy received an oak staff from him. There was one last criminal left in the room. Cadence moved towards him and grabbed him by the cloak. The red player begged to wait. But did he wait for the others? He and his partners had killed many people. The criminal did not give up. He tried to use a spell against the guy. Cook recovered the weapon left in the corpse and rushed to attack. The protagonist quickly ran up to the last red player. His time was up. Without a moment's hesitation, Cadence killed the last criminal by beheading him. The guy's level increased. Apparently, the system recognized them as monsters. This man has killed countless players, so there is no point in feeling guilty for his death. The character received the dungeon herb. Now he understood why the attackers were in such a hurry. He should also speed up. Left alone, the boy approached the detective, who told him that Lewis had killed his sister. Marshman thanked his savior and asked for a favor. His men were ambushed. They were divided. There were at least 10 enemies. The detective checked those who died. They were criminals. The prisoners became gamblers. And they are not attacked by monsters. They probably found some object. Plus their target is the shooter, Kevin. She is Emily Gibbs. The player did not expect to learn such a secret that the idol was a famous shooter. Could it be that the one above the heavens, the magical shooter Kevin, is a girl and also a famous idol? Even the most devoted fans could not imagine such a scenario. Near the audience, Orson and Cadence ran, hiding behind the bodies of the criminals. Cook was still thinking about the news the detective had told him. In fact, Marshman was also very surprised at first. A stunningly famous idol singer can be a great player. 12th place Kevin was given the nickname Magic Revolver Shooter for his skill with weapons. Who would have thought that Emily would spend so much money on donations? Cadence still can't believe it because they are so different. Having reached the required point, the guys stopped. They were surprised that their plan worked. The monsters don't pay attention to people. At first they were very worried, but the idea turned out to work. Since it was not possible to take the criminals' inventory, Cook decided to use their abilities. They remain active for 24 hours after death. Players stood in front of the entrance to the gym. There were remains of killed skeletons here, which means there were other players here. There are 3 hours left before the dungeon breaks. Too little time. The main character is now absolutely sure that someone is speeding up the passage of time. A grass from the underground, it doesn't sell well in stores, but it comes in handy in different situations. With its help, you can speed up the break. The method is simple. You need to create a flower. To do this, you need to mix 2 ingredients, grass and water, from the dungeon. Although it's strange, water only drops in dungeons of rank B and above. Among those the players met was a man who had been playing long enough to receive water as a reward for shutting down the server. Most people couldn't hack the server after it went down, so someone else did. At this time, Gibbs was actively fighting the monsters, and they were quite easy to deal with. Arrows were flying at her everywhere. This time the danger was from above. The girl deftly dodged them, jumping back to a safe distance. The criminals had already begun to harass the shooter. She could have dealt with the boss if they hadn't interfered with her. The boss of the E level, the Death Knight Virgil. Although he is strong, he has his weak points. The Death Knight has incredible stats and terrifying defense. From the title, it is clear that he only uses sword techniques that are easy to predict. Gibbs deals damage from a distance, so this opponent is perfect for her, but the problem is the shooters. How can they even shoot such a beautiful girl, and why doesn't the Death Knight attack them? They probably have some kind of immunity item. The girl realized that they were also players. But she can't shoot ordinary players, no matter how much she would like to. You need to concentrate. This is not a game, but reality. There is no other choice. First, the criminals themselves attacked Emily. They killed her allies. Secondly, the enemy is in front, so you need to aim there. Gathering all her will into a fist, the girl pulled the trigger. It's not for nothing that she's one of the top players. The bullet hit the target. One criminal was neutralized, but what to do with the rest? Gibbs managed to fool the masked men into thinking she was aiming at the monster. Due to her actions, the ranker received a poisonous potion. The boss came very close to the girl. We need to kill him as soon as possible and get out of this damn place. He will soon destroy everything here. The monster is incredibly strong. Will she be able to defeat him? The girl is very tired. Emily couldn't understand why her health was decreasing even if she dodged the attack. It was also realistic. Only now did Gibbs notice that there were 3 hours left before the dungeon would break. She realized that time was speeding up, which had not been so obvious before. The girl was busy fighting and rarely looked at the timer, so she didn't notice the acceleration of time. At her level, such a monster would not be defeated in 3 hours, if only she had more time. And if a rift occurs, the boss's level will increase to rank 4, then there will be no chance at all. So there is only one way out. The shooter decided to try one plan. It may well work. The gamer shot at the boss. She hit the target exactly, but how long will this shot last? The Death Knight is unconscious for 5 seconds. You need to finish him off during this time. Gibbs activated her blood sphere ability, which is her most powerful ability at the moment. Concentrating on the upcoming shot, the girl tried not to think about what would happen if she failed. It's time to finish off the monster and then the criminals. Stop wasting time. Gibbs's current body wouldn't last long. She could already feel her body becoming heavier, and it was becoming harder to breathe. She has to hit it in one try. She has to shoot straight at the target. Emily was about to pull the trigger when Cook screamed at her at the top of his lungs to run. 5 seconds passed. The shooter did not have time to complete her plan. The boss came to his senses and began to get up. The gamer did not understand what happened. She missed, and her stamina was already at 0. She was finished. Just as the monster was about to fish for the girl, Cadence set a barrier for 3 seconds. Ranker managed to catch the weakened Emily and gently put her on the floor. The young man asked the singer if she was okay. There was no time to rant. There was very little time left, and the boss was still not defeated. The monster began to transform, and hope for success was diminishing at an incredible rate. He has evolved. If the boss is now level D, then there is no chance of winning. Demon Lord Virgil, after leveling up, he will need time to adapt. This is a chance. Emily warned the players that they could still escape the dungeon. The girl is sure that it is now impossible to kill the boss. All that remains is to run. And the criminals stopped shooting. They must have escaped through the exit. And they will try to prevent the team from leaving the dungeon. But it is better to meet them than to fight the boss. The problem is how to save the rest of the people in such a short period of time. Cadence decides to fight the monster, but he needs different equipment. With a long sword, he can buy a little time, but such a weapon is not enough to win. Cook asked Orson to lend him his weapon for a while. It is, of course, for level 80, but it's okay. As soon as Cadence took the spear, he felt incredible power. Wave Rider Spear, a tier 80 item, a magical weapon that creates waves that increase damage. If the user's level does not match it, it will not manifest itself to its full potential and will remain sealed. Emily was confused. Since the guy awakened the spear, then his level was higher than 80. Come to think of it, he had strengthened his entire body and was even able to grab the girl while she was using the blood sphere. Who is this player and why is he so confident in his victory over the D-rank boss? The team stood in front of a strong opponent that had to be defeated at any cost. The young man took care of the tired girl and gave her a dividing potion. Now it's Demon Lord Virgil's turn. These are his final moments of existence. The player decided to run around the boss and create a circular wave of damage. The protagonist activated the dragon's eye to find the monster's weak spot. It remained in the same place, in the neck, a bit high, but still real. Thanks to his previous damage wave, Cadence activated a wave of thunder that disoriented the boss. The monster was captured by the Prices, but he broke the attack with his weapon. It seems like the Demon Lord can't resist the ability. He still needs time to adapt. He is now the weakest of the level D bosses. The team is able to defeat the monster. At this moment, Gibbs decided to help her partner. Virgil was attacked by the sniper's flashbangs and was unable to block a single shot. The gamer decided to ask the stranger who he was, since he had such high-level potions. It doesn't matter for now. We need to hurry while the potion is still working on Emily. The girl immediately rushed into battle with renewed strength. Since her partner was not running away, she was ready to fight too. Thanks to her actions, the Lord is immobilized for 3 seconds, a great moment to use fierce waves. The guy threw a spear at the boss, leaving a huge hole in him. The monster was too badly wounded to fight any longer. The team defeated the level D boss, Demon Lord Virgil, and the guy's level increased. The squad managed to clear out the fallen rank D school. The players went to rescue the remaining team members. At this time, the criminals were waiting for Kevin at the exit. She is the key to their plan. They cannot leave the girl alive. The sniper hasn't come out for quite some time. Did she die in the boss fight? She may be capable, but she's not level 80, and even Emily would have a hard time defeating a D-level monster. We need to continue to monitor the portal and report the situation. We can't underestimate the shooter. A notification popped up. The fallen school was cleared. The dungeon rift was canceled. There was no choice. The blacklist disappeared from the labyrinth of choice. An interesting outcome of events, the criminals decided to retreat. The attackers realized that Carl had undergone training and was most likely involved in the cleansing of the fallen school. Cadence handed the Wave Rider spear back to the owner and thanked Orson. Gibbs figured out Cook's secret and realized that the legendary ranker Carl was standing in front of her. The guy was flattered that the famous idol singer recognized the ranker. Marshman began to explain that Cadence's abilities were impressive, but the #1 ranker left the labyrinth of choice. It is impossible that he came out from there and immediately came here during the dungeon break. The chances of such a coincidence are negligible. Emily came here to meet Carl. There are stories about places that never became dungeons, but it is unknown who is behind this. That's why the girl thought so. She asked the player for forgiveness. She should have thanked the hero first. Cadence never admitted that Gibbs was right. He said that Emily was innocent. The squad found all the survivors and delivered them from the dungeon to an abandoned school storeroom. Many survived. That's good. Now every player is valued. The team was afraid that they would not find any survivors at all, and they all simply hid. The survivors were ashamed that they had chickened out and not helped the boys in such a difficult battle. However, people are not guilty. It's good that they just stayed alive. The nurse asked the detective how he was feeling and whether he could move. Cook completely agreed with Orson. They still have time to become stronger. Now what is important is that the guys are alive. Let the detective think differently, but he will be useful during the cleanup. The comrade decided to ask Emily if she was okay, because the girl was left alone with a strong monster. Although the player was more injured than Gibbs, she was genuinely concerned about the shooter's condition. The idol replied that she was fine, and the girl also admitted that she had screwed up a bit with the task. Marshman hopes that the squad will now be able to enter the camp. He invited Cadence to join. The main character accepted the offer. The other participants were surprised by the new comrade. He is strong enough. The squad arrived at Banjo Station. All the monsters are outside the F level. They got out of the dungeon during the rift. Since they had lived in small spaces for a long time before, they will not enter the same ones here. They must have chosen this place by chance, but the location is quite good. At the bottom of the station, there was a whole settlement, from old people to small children, those who managed to survive the day of release. People were glad to see Marshman back, and everyone rushed to meet him. The detective was genuinely glad to return to camp and see everyone safe and sound. An old man's voice was heard in the distance, and the policeman asked how the camp had been doing in his absence. The leader reported on the losses and wounded soldiers. The old man asked the detachment to rest. He would bring them food. The detective approached the ranker and suggested that he rest while the food was being prepared. Too many things happened today. Even though the day wasn't difficult, it was still nerve-wracking. The guy had just started to fall asleep when he panicked and began to disperse the sleep. He couldn't lose his vigilance. During this time, the main character completely forgot to check the reward for defeating the boss. Virgil's Blade of Regret, unique ability to coat the blade in ice, required level 120. Even if a player uses all the points he has collected, it will hardly be enough to reach level 100. In case of a level limitation, the user will need to add points, which means that in total they will have to be equal to 600. And the detective could use a spear even though he wasn't level 80, so does that mean a slight discrepancy is acceptable? The problem is that the main character's reward is not only a weapon, but also a sealed book. It cannot be used without access, since it is a legendary item, and it was because of this book that he came. It will take some effort, but the biggest problem is that the guy took the animal out of his inventory. Cadence touched the toy on the nose. As it came to life, Glenn woke up at the will of the owner. Glenn jumped to the floor. A rumbling sound came from his stomach. The little animal was catastrophically hungry. Glenn is a pet that followed Carl around Dreamworld. The character is very happy that he woke up. But the pet's reaction is too strong. There can be only one reason for this: the dungeon. It's not that bad now. He's in squirrel form, but his true form is a dungeon-eating monster. Monster Glendower, Cook's former pet that he met at level 15 and a reward for closing the 3rd server. It eats nothing but monsters from the dungeon. So when the little beast acts worried, it means that something is happening related to the dungeon. The problem is that it started in a camp, in a place where there are a lot of people. It might be the skeletons. Some monsters might have been released during the dungeon break. So there are only 2 options. Either something is wrong with Glenn, or something strange is going on here. The only downside to him specializing in smells is that it is unclear what attracts the animal. Then Cadence noticed a man muttering under his breath that he was dying of hunger. Here's the thing. He looks like he's on the edge. His fingernails are already turning black. There was a meeting taking place on the edge of the camp, and people were unhappy with what they were hearing. The man was furious. He didn't want to go kill the skeletons and risk his life. If people hide, the monsters will go away and they will be safe. That's the whole point. Since the skeletons started to spread out in different directions, many people will die because of them. And for players, this is a chance to level up and become stronger. Monsters are dangerous because of the dungeons. Since they received the blessing of the dungeon from them, they are now weakened. Besides, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun is at its peak, which is when the dead are at their weakest. No one forces the guys to go fight, their lives are in their hands. The decision is theirs alone. Cadence can't pass up this chance to bulk up, and he needs to find something. The detective announced to the squad that there were newcomers among them and that they needed to introduce themselves. A police officer, Orson Marshman, he is quite confident in close combat. After the leader, Riley Becker introduced himself as if he were speaking to his classmates. Next up was Emily Gibbs. She's level 79 and she's good with firearms. The gamer didn't need to talk about herself. She's so popular that everyone knows her. Next up was Harley Francis. Judging by his gear, he had been playing the first Dream World. Here, Orson decided to introduce Cook to the team. Clearly, no one knows him. Harley jumped up and shouted to everyone that Cadence Cook was standing in front of them. As it turned out, they studied at the same school. The main character was a typical victim. He often bullied Cadence at school, especially after the Cook family went bankrupt. The guy responded indifferently that Francis had changed a lot, as if he had been reborn. Here, Emily stood up for the character. She noted that the squad was alive thanks to Cook and demanded that the impudent man apologize. While things were going on, Cadence confidently informed the squad that he was the legendary ranker, Carl. Everyone was in shock. In front of them stood Carl himself, the one who is above the heavens. He has no equal. Gibbs knew it. Her intuition was right. It was Cook she had been looking for all this time. Marshman was embarrassed and asked for forgiveness for the misunderstanding. Harley was seething with anger and started shouting that Cadence was lying. He couldn't be Carl. Before the impudent man notices the t-shirt, it falls out of Virgil's boss. Francis didn't want to accept this fact. He was sure that Orson was helping Cook. Then the bully asked what level the guy was. Cadence calmly replied that he was level 37. Harley tried to prove to everyone that the player was a liar. The team went to clear the streets. Cook activated the dragon's eye and informed his comrades where the monsters were. After the main character discovered a whole squad of skeletons ahead, the command was given to prepare for battle. Marshman threw his spear into the crowd of monsters, clearing the way for his comrades. The commander gave the order to attack 2 at a time against 1 skeleton, but there were too many monsters. They would soon surround the squad. One of the players was already running out of stamina when Gibbs appeared and covered her comrade. Francis demanded that Cook get out of the way and watch a professional handle the matter. At school, he asked for bread and gave 50,000 won because he did not know how much bread cost. The main character didn't hold a grudge against the bully because once with his help, Cadence managed to earn money. Glenn sat and happily devoured skeletons and unnecessary objects. The character approached the pet and asked if he smelled anything tasty nearby. Glenn turned his attention to the southeast, which meant there was something interesting there. The guy smashed the skeleton with 1 blow and began to look for what the little animal pointed to. The skull was empty. Glenn felt something tasty right next to his owner. Cook threw the skull to his pet and he was delighted. The sun will set soon, which means the dead will become stronger. Time to return to camp. The team members were glad they came. They raised their levels well. Orson came across Cook sitting near a mountain of skeletons. The commander asked the player what he was doing. The main character was already on edge. The pet had eaten a large amount, but still hadn't indicated what the guy needed. Glenn smelled the buffet nearby. His eyes changed. Perhaps something valuable this time. Marshman thanked everyone for their work and suggested returning to camp. Cadence approached the detective and asked him to go to one place first. Glenn pointed out the flower shop to the owner. There must be something interesting there. There was an unbearable stench inside. It was impossible to breathe. The entire squad held their noses. E-Class Dungeon, Garden of Death, discovered, must eliminate the Flower King that is spreading spores. Reward for completion. Flower Bud of the King of Flowers. Time to complete 30 minutes. In case of failure, a rift will occur. The virus spores cause the disease of the dungeon. The initial rift has already occurred inside. That's what Glenn reacted to in the camp. The man's face turned red and his fingers darkened because of the dungeon. Dreamworld has different dungeons, both regular and themed, designed in a certain style. Gardens of Death, where motionless monsters live. Flowers. When a rift occurs, it releases not monsters, but a virus. When the virus spores enter the body, they become deadly parasites that turn people into monsters. The people in the camp are like NPCs. The virus will affect all NPCs who don't have resistance. But with players with E-Class resistance, everything should be fine. We need to stop the development of the virus. The sun will set soon. The monsters will become stronger and the squad will become an ideal target for them. The red color of the portal means that there is very little left before the rift. If the team leaves it, everything will only get worse. When the dungeon turns into a dungeon, not only the team members but also the people in the camp will be in danger. The portal was only discovered now because it was hidden behind an inconspicuous door. The squad had no choice but to go underground. There was no point in returning to the camp. And then the team will figure it out as we go along. There's very little time left. The detective decided to conduct a small raid, sending the best players to the dungeon and the rest to the camp. 3 would have been enough, Cadence, Emily, and Oars, but a minimum of 4 players was required to enter. The team is weak under Francis. He has a good defense stat, and he is a high-level player. So no one should die. But you can't relax. The dungeons are cemeteries for people. Harley was indignant. Why do they need a low-level deceiver? They need to go back to camp and take someone better. Just as he wanted to eat the apple, Cook said not to touch the fruit. Francis was indignant because it was an apple of the dungeon. A great thing for replenishing mana. The more mature it is, the more mana it will give. Cadence warned his comrade about the danger, but he didn't want to listen. Emily is fed up with the antics of a narcissistic idiot who is so stupid that he can't tell the difference between an apple and a poisonous fruit. We must not forget that the squad is in the Gardens of Death, where every plant intends to kill someone. Finally, the team reached the boss's room. They got here without any problems, which raises suspicions. The dungeon boss is in the greenhouse. He is called the King of Flowers. He looks like a sunflower because he often witnesses human deaths. Experienced players call him a suicide bomber. After defeating the Flower King, the party will receive a flower bulb which can be used as an antidote. This is the only hope for curing the sick at the station. Francis decided to heroically get the onion himself. The greenhouse started to stink terribly. Could flowers really smell so badly of slop? The boss began to attack the squad. He hit the place where the guys were standing with his thorny stem, but they managed to jump back. Emily shot the King of Flowers, and the sunflower didn't like it. Francis decided to deal with the boss alone. He ordered Cadence not to interfere. Suddenly, the clumsy hero tripped over the monster he stepped on. He should have watched his step. Obviously, the flowers next to the king will be different. To get to him, you need to cross this field of piranhas. The commander said that we need to trust Gibbs. There is no other option. But it is too long. The flower will have time to become D-level. However, if she enters the state of the blood sphere, she will be able to increase the area of damage. The girl asked if Cook had the elixir. Emily asked for 1 elixir, but Cadence refused her. Because of the rest, he didn't have a chance to level up. The main character rushed straight towards the boss. He needs to become stronger. The guy easily dealt with the thorny vines. They were no problem for Cook. Francis looked at Cadence with envy. How he could do such things on the 37th level. The envious person suggested 2 options. Either Cook is lying and his level is very high, or the player uses an unbalanced ability. Easily making his way through the predatory sunflowers, Carl killed the boss with 1 blow. It was too much. Cadence passed the dungeon in a matter of seconds. The protagonist received valuable artifacts, a flower bulb and a spiked glove. He finally managed to move his level up 3 notches. During the time spent in the dungeon, it had gotten dark, and the squad was returning home. The loot is better than the hero could have imagined. This glove has the ability of spikes. If necessary, the hand turns into a kind of sword. Thanks to the celestial body skill, the character has no limitation in using weapons, so the glove will come in handy. Soon, Cadence will be able to clear D-rank dungeons, thereby creating a clear line between herself and other players. Francis couldn't believe it. It turns out this man really was Carl. The detachment came across a battle site. The picture was horrific. The people were clearly in a panic. The detective checked the pulse. The people were already dead. It looked like something happened in the camp. The team immediately rushed to the camp. The station was dead silent. Cadence came across footsteps, all in different directions, as if someone was walking back and forth. The protagonist is sure that this is the progression of the dungeon disease. There are no signs of skeletons here. The boys heard someone's voice. Someone managed to escape after all. The potion cannot be used on the target. A revival potion is needed. The man's legs are in terrible condition. The victim was given a paralysis potion to stop him feeling pain. This was enough for the wounded man. He came to, and the detective began asking what had happened in their absence. The man began to tell that it all started suddenly. A huge monster appeared on the stairs. The people were preparing to lead him into a trap, just as they had trained. But danger was lurking behind. People began to turn into zombies and attack other people. First Samuel, then Lilith. Bobby ran away, and the man tried to save them. Painful memories drove the player into a state of madness, and he began to scream. If there had been a healer nearby, my husband could have been cured, and there would have been no need to worry about the virus. Everyone ran away, and Lilith became a monster, probably the third stage of the dungeon disease. The first stage ends with a change in the color of the fingers and chills. The second turns a person into a zombie and makes him attack others. Only in the third do people become monsters. The man died. But the garden had already been cleared. The third stage had arrived so quickly, although the symptoms had only just begun to develop. Somewhere in the darkness of the station, among the corridors, a new boss was waiting for the team. Emily made quick work of the zombies with her revolver. If the transformation has occurred, the person can no longer be cured. Those who could not survive the disease of the dungeon lie here, and the rest went along the paths. The detective asked everyone to take on the monster, and Cadence quickly completed the task. The squad wandered through the corridors, hoping to find survivors who could still be saved. Finally, new tracks appeared. They again lead in different directions. They probably lead to Station 8, which the camp originally planned to go there in an emergency. Cadence spotted a monster ahead along the path and rushed towards it. It was Lilith, the one the dead man was talking about. Now she is a monster that needs to be dealt with. This is the outcome of the dungeon disease. It turns people into monsters. Many people died in the game because of it. With the fate of all humanity at stake, Cook needs to finish off the monster as quickly as possible. She is strong. The extra arms serve as a shield for the monster. In that case, you need to get rid of these hands. The main character cut off everything unnecessary. A new hand burst out of the monster's mouth and wanted to grab the guy. Marshman wanted to help, but most attacks are useless against Lilith. This is a Stage 3 monster, level 80, so Orson can't handle it. You need to find Lilith's weak spot and hit it directly to kill the monster. The weak point turned out to be the neck. The guy asked for forgiveness from his former comrade and chopped off her head. After going through 3 stages, she became equal in strength to a D-level monster. Previously, the character would not have been able to cope with her. Fortunately, during the training, the player managed to collect 100 experience points. If he uses them all, he will become 3 times stronger. However, for someone who is above the heavens, when converted to the 100th level, the points should be higher. After all, the dungeons wouldn't wait for the players to get stronger as the monsters were approaching. They are all in the 3rd stage of the disease, or what can be called the insatiable stage. People who have undergone transformation are simply monsters and cannot be saved. The squad was surrounded by monsters. Could they really have been waiting for the squad to reach the right station? You need to think about this later. First, you need to deal with a bunch of monsters. Francis struck the zombie, but he couldn't even hurt the monster. The player thought that it would be easier to kill it. Cadence covered his comrade and dealt with the monster in one blow. The main character decided to find out if the team was sure that the rest had gone to the 8th station. There can be no other option. There is a shopping center and other stores nearby, thanks to which you can replenish your supplies. It was suggested to go there right now, but it is too dangerous. There will be more monsters there. Obviously, there are bigger problems waiting for the team there, but if people had gone the wrong way, the guy would not have changed his decision. There is no time to discuss the direction. The monsters are attacking again. At the 3rd stage, people completely change their appearance. Some grow wings, some grow legs and arms. Sometimes monsters become larger or thinner. What is interesting is that the type of mutation depends on the desire of people. In order to deal with them, you need to determine their desires. For example, an extra eye is the embodiment of the desire to see more. Or in human form, he was blind and wanted to fix it. The main character decided to use the flashlight from his phone to blind the monster. He managed to knock down the transformed man. The monster temporarily lost his sight. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the ranker pierced the monster and killed it. Everything is much easier if there is an understanding of the reason. The training weapon had outlived its usefulness and had fallen apart into pieces. The detective offered to give up his spear. Cadence refused such an offer. He has a lot of weapons, and so the guy will have to worry about the commander. The main character put on a spiked glove, just wanting to try out a new weapon. It is more dangerous to use because the radius of destruction is smaller, but it is an effective weapon. Cadence easily took down the monster and finished him off with one blow. Harley began to go crazy with envy. Finally, the squad reached the boss's territory. Even monsters don't come here. Red magic pears? It seems the enemy is aware of the arrival of guests. This is a monster of almost the fourth stage. It probably appeared during the rift. Someone fed it a flower. This creates a trigger that acts as a source of the disease. When the virus enters the body, it begins to multiply there, and the symptoms worsen. If the trigger is not stopped, the dungeon disease will spread to all of Seoul. The team was horrified. The monster grabbed the man with its paws, preparing to devour him. The victim asked for help. In one movement, the monster bit off the man's head and threw the lifeless body to the floor. The monster urged people to subscribe to the channel and like it, and it also advised them to activate notifications so as not to miss a new video. The entire corridor was strewn with the bodies of the blogger monster's victims. These people died a horrible death. The smell of blood mixed with the air. I wonder how many lives the monster took. It was a terrible picture. The detective asked the ranker what triggers were, but the guy himself didn't fully understand. Perhaps it was a type of hydra. The form of the trigger depends on what desire the person had before the transformation, before he ate the dungeon flower. Judging by the traces of the battle that took place before we got to the station, and if the stories are to be believed, then there is a feeling that someone brought the trigger here. It is unlikely that the monster will attack first. Until the guys encounter the trigger themselves, they will not learn anything new. Judging by the amount of mana, the monster is clearly above level 100. Apparently, it is a Class D boss of a medium dungeon. The monster moves extremely slowly and does not stand out in terms of strength, but this is not enough to win. This is not an easy game where you can beat the same opponent with a high level or stats. It is worth noting that each monster fights in its own style, depending on the enhancements that appear. A low-level monster can scatter strong players. Apparently, the monster's entire power lies, if not in strength, then in endurance. The detective thought he had heard this voice somewhere before. It was Midfox. This voice, the signature intonation of one famous blogger, he should be in prison. Did he really escape? He was supposed to be executed because he ate human flesh on one of the broadcasts, and an examination confirmed that it was human. In short, before becoming a trigger, he was in complete trouble, on the verge of execution. The monster grew extra arms and kept repeating the same phrases, asking people to subscribe to the channel and like it. Cadence boldly rushed into battle. He was confident in his strength. The monster blogger was not scary to him. The blogger's hands were everywhere. They wanted to grab Francis, but he desperately fought back. The character couldn't keep up with the monster's speed. So Marshman stood up for his partner and cut off the monster's hands. Marshman alone won't be able to handle it. The boss's mobility is provided by a bunch of new limbs. You need to be careful. The puddle of slime next to which Cook stood turned into a new hand. There was no time to relax. To gain time for an attack, the monster needs to be distracted. The detective asked Cadence for help. The guy quickly came up with a plan of action. The most effective way to distract someone is to hit them hard. The protagonist delivered a stunning blow to the boss with all his might, but it was not enough. The damage is too little, and the enemy has a lot of endurance. If you don't change tactics, the guys won't last long. Apparently, the boss decided to finish off the squad in the same way he killed someone last time on the stream. The monster grew axe-like hands. The monster began to chop everything around. Then the boss noticed the idol and decided to have a snack with her. But Gibbs gave a worthy rebuff. It's as if he's in a shell. Emily's bullets are no match for him. Neither strength nor reaction speed will help him defeat him. More stamina is needed. Only with it will the team be able to defeat the monster. The gamer shot at the boss again, this time with the aim of distracting him rather than wounding him. Cadence took advantage of the opportunity and approached the monster from behind. The main character delivered another blow. However, the boss didn't care. You can't take him with such blows. You need to come up with another plan. The monster sucked in the shooter's bullets and part of his arm, leaving a stump. He simply ate them. The squad was shocked. But at that moment, they all thought of the same thing, a way to destroy the boss. The monster hit the wall where Cook was sitting. He managed to avoid the attack. The team's blows were too weak for the monster. Apparently, the attacks work, and it is possible to finish off the boss at this rate, but it will take too much time, and the squad does not have it. It seemed that there was only one way out. Harley bravely agreed to be bait for the new plan. Francis tried to anger his boss as much as possible. He called the blogger fat, pointing to his belly. The character had good armor, and the guys were covering their comrades, so he had nothing to fear, but goosebumps still ran down his spine. Just as the monster was about to swallow Francis, Orson jumped up and pinned the boss's mouth with his spear. Emily, in turn, on command, fired into the monster's open mouth. wondering if he would now be able to defend himself with his barrier. The boss didn't like this attack. The projectile exploded inside and began to punch holes in the monster's body. There was one last blow left. The squad divided the duties among themselves. They needed to distract the monster's attention again. There is little mana left, and little strength. But this can be easily fixed by investing the points earned earlier. It's time to finish off the boss. Cadence activated the magic concentration skill. He managed to use the skill that usually requires a lot of mana. Since his opponent is so strong, it means he needs to hit even harder, and he can use the resources he has for this. The boss was happy. He wanted to taste human flesh again. He began to connect his hands together. He wove a protective net from his hands to trap the main character. The monster was already anticipating how delicious the guy would be to eat. The net was descending right on Cadence. The boss was sure that now the character would not be able to escape. Cook waited for the moment when the network had dropped to a sufficient level, and he destroyed it. The blogger was still asking for likes and subscriptions to the channel. The main character cut off his hands. Cadence promised not only to like, but also to repost, and the whole team would subscribe to the channel. The main character reposted the boss with all his might. Now the team's attacks have become more effective. The team was able to defeat the glutton monster. Cook received a level increase and a reward. The Ring of Attention. The boss's body became an ordinary corpse. As life left the body, mana also left it. He was pretty well hacked up. Which person did this, and most importantly, for what purpose, the team must find out. Cadence's gaze fell on Mid's neck. On it was lightning crossing 2 moons. Some kind of cult was involved here. The magician watched the situation through his ball. The player was surprised that Carl was alive. In Seoul, the man was responsible for only 5 farms, which he occasionally checked to make sure they were safe to grow triggers on. Adam Chandler had never seen anyone so strong. Carl couldn't have survived. It was impossible. Dawson Foreman walked into the gentleman's office. He assumed that the leader was pretending to be busy, but was secretly having fun. The company is one of the Dreamworld organizations that little is known about, but it was like a tumor poisoning everything it could reach. By expanding their dungeons, they threatened the people on the continent, as can be seen from their emblem, a lightning bolt passing through 2 moons. Adam noted that his subordinate arrived just in time. He discovered something strange. Mr. Chandler showed the ball to Dawson, who should see that Carl seemed to have survived. Adam couldn't believe what he saw, according to reports, among newbies, on the easy difficulty level in the labyrinths of choice. There are no candidates who would be sent to the hellish level, but here men saw the impossible with their own eyes. Carl may be dead after all, but if he is alive, he will definitely try to interfere with the company. Chandler wants Foreman to ask his farmers if they've seen anything suspicious. However, Adam quickly changed his mind. He no longer needed it. Chandler found what he was looking for. The squad ran along the corridor. The squad continued to search for survivors from the station. Cadence, Carl's great ranker, was running with the team, unaware that they were being followed at that very moment. The sword piercing Acolyte's neck, the monsters that were brutally torn apart under his command. A dungeon that can only be handled by one person? Its true nature is a crock, and it has data that has not been erased. So, by devouring people, Adam could foresee the current situation on Earth, but Carl, who was supposed to undergo training and die, remained alive. Mr. Chandler froze, lost in his thoughts. The thought that Carl had survived frightened him to the point of horror. Dawson decided to encourage the leader because the players are not the same as they knew before. Even the ranker is now a newbie in training. Although it is still worth reporting to the head of the company, if this is true, then he needs to be dealt with immediately. At this time, Riley was running away from a horde of zombies through the subway station. He was the only one who survived the disaster at the camp. He wondered why the monsters weren't exhausted at all. It was hard to believe they had recently been human. Becker ran off to another station. He had already begun to think that he would die without ever meeting the detective. Eventually, the guy saw the light. He came across a train. He couldn't believe how there could be a working train in the new reality. 3 whole months have passed since the power went out, so how could there be a train here? There was no time to think. The zombies were catching up with Riley. He had to escape from them as quickly as possible. The character flew into the train. A warning sounded in the cabin asking to take your seats. Since the train was leaving, the doors were closing. The train left the platform. The monsters remained at the station. The guy managed to escape. Becker slid to the floor. He was alive. He had to run a lot. He urgently needed to get to Station 8. The detective should be there. Riley entered the Class D-themed dungeon, the Ghost Train. After a while, the attendant will start checking tickets. Stowaways will become targets for station staff. The guy is desperate about how he will survive in a Class D dungeon. Harley still didn't believe that Cook had defeated the boss. He had, of course, assumed that it was possible, but when he saw it with his own eyes, Francis began to truly admire Cadence. He was able to defeat a D-rank boss with a low level. While the character admired the ranker, Emily wondered if his behavior was a manifestation of illness. As the team ran, the detective, looking at what was happening around him, began to wonder if anyone could have survived at all. And the main character himself noticed that the trigger turned out to be extremely resilient. It was extremely difficult to escape from it. There may be one survivor. It's a bit like fishing. Most likely all survivors are eventually infected, and some were thrown out specifically as bait, and when they meet this herd, the infected will immediately try to eat them. Triggers were created for a reason. The disease is getting more serious, and who knows? Maybe one day all people will turn into triggers. The company was a sort of NPS that had gone over to the evil side and could create quests and use them to lure players. They grew in power until one player destroyed everything. Player Carl entered the system. At the time, he tried to relieve the accumulated stress by destroying the dungeons they had worked so hard to build. At some point, the biggest entertainment in Dreamworld became destroying the company. They have every right to hate Carl for this, but this is what makes the game different from the real world. But you need to check everything and make sure that it is the same company and not just a bunch of imitators, which may consist of players. During this time, the squad arrived at Station 8. Cadence decided for himself, no matter who is behind these things, they need to be stopped. Apparently, it was not for nothing that Station 8 was nicknamed a ghost. There are not even any traces here. If something goes wrong, the team has an escape plan, and these are supplies for those who might end up here by accident. They were hidden last time. It seems that someone had visited the ghost station. Some of the supplies were missing from the box. Cook decided to find out why the people from the camp never became players, because they only needed to go through training. Orson didn't know how to answer correctly. Gibbs decided to clarify the situation. At that time, the internet was limited, so some people were never able to join the ranks of rankers. Then Cadence asked if Emily could use the network. It turns out she just updated her phone. Additionally, only people with such switches are allowed to communicate with others. Plus, there is a level system that is only available to players. At the moment, the only way to become a player is to apply to ARC. Gibbs continued that she wasn't there often, but it was the only remaining base in the city. The company members came to scout the subway. They followed the trail of corpses and came to the conclusion that Mr. Chandler was right. Gordon Taft of the company, head of the third group, he was sent to find out if Carl really survived. The group reached the ghost train, and an announcement echoed around the area asking passengers to take their seats. A themed dungeon that many talk about and few have been able to get into, but this train used to always run on the first line, and now it's on the 9th. Construction work was carried out here earlier, and apparently a railway line was also built at that time. A subordinate suggested to his boss that he take the train since it was going to the 8th station, and such a chance rarely comes up. Gordon was furious. Was his colleague really tired of living? This is a Class D-themed dungeon. Although it is under the control of the company, the group does not have access to it. If they enter it, they will remain in it. Taft didn't join the company just to die so stupidly at the very beginning of Dreamworld 2. The subordinate was perplexed. Mr. Chandler ordered to find Carl. Gordon was furious since it was impossible to carry out the order. Besides, if the boys themselves board the ghost train, the goblins will do all the work for Taft's group. Ark translates from English as Ark, and apparently this is a reference to Noah's Ark. It seems that the Ark really is the last base in the entire city. Emily continued to fill Cook in on the situation, and by updating the system, she was able to upgrade the phone, so they were trying to get into the Ark all this time. Then Cadence realized that it was likely that the rest of the survivors were there. Marshman suggested that the detachment move forward faster. It was unlikely that the survivors had gone far. Glenn suddenly became active. He started crawling all over his body. Cadence's whole body was itching. The pet smelled something tasty. Not far from here. We need to check it urgently. Cadence decided to go and check what was in the direction Glenn was pointing. The squad rushed after them. The one running away clearly knew that people were running after him. Not monsters, since the squad was talking loudly. The team is currently trying to catch up with someone other than the station survivor. The runner constantly turns around, and sometimes he even slows down as if he wants to lure the squad. The chase led the boys to the waiting room. Then the stranger disappeared. They began to look around. Harley wondered why the fugitive had brought the team here. Perhaps it was a trap. Before Francis could blink, an arrow was a centimeter from the bridge of his nose. He was lucky that Cadence had good reflexes and didn't let him shoot his comrade. Cook broke the arrow in half. The entire area was covered in smoke. The enemy began firing from ambush at the detachment with a bow. The shooter was not visible. The main character, together with the detective, diffuses flying arrows. Cadence's reaction is faster than the speed of the arrow. The guys missed one arrow. It was flying straight at Emily. But the gamer did not lose her head and destroyed the danger that threatened her with a precise shot. There's no need to worry about her. Then Carl and the gamer, despite the shelling, will catch up with the enemy and destroy him. Finally, the main character found the shooter. He was about to hit the enemy and knock him out. A kobold appeared in front of Cook. The character did not attack the creature. Probably there was a rift somewhere nearby. Gibbs didn't have time to get a handle on the situation. Cadence was trying to warn his partner that the kobold wasn't dangerous. But the player was already late. A bullet flew out of the singer's revolver, leaving only dissipating smoke. Although the shot could no longer be prevented, Emily, having heard the warning, managed to shift the trajectory of the bullet. Hanaldy was delighted with the player. He was sure that Cook knew something and was ready to believe him unconditionally. The main character had to explain to the team that they were not dealing with a monster, but a human. Other kobolds came running to the noise. They also turned out to be people. Something bad happened to them. The leader of the aggrieved people decided to make sure that those who came here were not usurers. He introduced himself to the squad as Nolan Black, and the leader confirmed that his people were not monsters. The team didn't trust Nolan and his people, so Cadence decided to clear the air. As everyone knows, the names of monsters are illuminated, but people do not have illumination. The squad members carefully examined the kobolds, who were indeed white. This means that the team is faced with normal players. The monsters will never have a white name. Next, Cook decided to find out why the kobolds lured him into a trap and then attacked the boys, and whether they really hated people. Black began to show with all his might that this was not so. They attacked the squad by mistake. The leader told the squad his story. All this misfortune happened because of the usurers. On the opening day of Dreamworld, a young boy did not understand how the game became a reality, and such a cruel one at that. He desperately tried to survive in a new post-apocalyptic world that would never be the same again. In the old days, Black loved to play Dreamworld. Until he was sent to the army, he leveled up to almost level 200. He also owned many items that could earn him many rewards. However, just when he entered the army, the time for exchange ended. Nolan was never able to earn the award. However, he is not some newbie, so he wouldn't be left with a bare ass in Dreamworld 2. After this, Black managed to unite with the rest of the survivors. They vowed to stay alive, every single one of them. So they headed into the labyrinth of choice all together on the normal difficulty level. Nolan was the only one of all who completed the maze on the normal difficulty level. Since then, the newly formed squad has continued to survive, but Black has emerged as the central figure. And then, suddenly, mysterious traders appeared all over the station. The crew should not have accepted them. The merchants were very friendly and welcoming, and they shared the food and equipment they were selling. People were very grateful. It looked like a sign of goodwill, but in the end, it turned out to be a regular scam. Survivors who could not pay the merchants sacrificed their player cards, naively believing that this was a simple investment for their future benefit. Moreover, people did not know at the time that the food that the traders so graciously shared contained drugs. When signing a contract, the merchants never talked about the most important thing. If people don't pay for their services on time, they'll have to pay with their own bodies. As it turned out, it was written on the back in very small print, and that's how people lost their bodies. At some point, the traders disappeared and the moneylenders appeared. According to the terms of the agreement, they took the bodies and disappeared, and the souls of people remained locked in the bodies of kobolds. But this was only the beginning. The loan sharks started coming once a week to collect the interest. This was also in the contract. It is unknown where the traders used them, but people were robbed of their memories. Cadence suddenly realized that the other kobolds might not be able to speak because the main character needed to clarify whether anyone else had come to this station, for example, from another station. But Nolan replied that there was no one. Then Cook asked if the amount of the debt had changed, but it had not. The guy came up with a plan and asked when the moneylenders would come next. Speak of the devil and he will appear. And it was at this moment that the loan sharks descended on the station. The detachment decided to hide from the eyes of unwanted guests. Cook became very angry with the merchants and moneylenders. The kobolds bought absolutely everything for the same price, and the percentage was the same. However, the degree of memory loss is different for everyone. Some have even forgotten human language, while others have not. The detective and Emily still didn't understand what Cadence was getting at. They listened carefully to the guy. Firstly, everyone has a different amount of knowledge and memories in their head because people are all different. Take Nolan, for example. His memories consist of 23 years of his life. The other players were younger and knew much less due to their age. It turns out that because of this, Nolan Black fights with the loan sharks, even though he understands that he is weaker than them. But what happens when the kobolds forget that they were once humans? They might turn into monsters because all their memories will be erased. And since a kobold has a human soul in his body, that's why the system identifies them as players. Cadence realized that only he and the guys could help the kobolds who found themselves in a difficult situation. The moneylender walked around the station looking for debtors, and the kobolds jumped out at him from their hiding places. They tried to take the enemy by surprise and at least wound him with their arrows, but the moneylender's skin turned out to be much thicker. All the kobold's attacks did not cause a drop of damage to the moneylender. The monster approached one of the debtors and grabbed him by the head. The monster decided to remind him that he had to pay for everything the kobolds had taken, and then the moneylender smashed the poor fellow. Then the monster took on the others, running straight at the debtor to do the same thing to him. Cadence didn't let anyone hurt a defenseless man fighting for his right to live, and the guys skillfully fought off the attacker. The main character does not intend to tolerate such an attitude towards the kobolds, who were cruelly deceived. He killed the monster. The moneylender is also a goblin. He looks strong, and he is also a level 80 player. The attacker asked Cook to mind his own business, calling him a leather. Cadence pointed out that the moneylender himself was a man. The main character is tired of wagging his tongue. It's time to act. He grabbed the enemy by the horn. Having knocked him to the floor, the player swung his mace and hit the enemy with all his might. One moneylender is ready. It remains to deal with the rest. The team has enough strength to protect the kobolds. It seems that to become a goblin, you need to deal with your own parents. They are very different from kobolds. At this time, the fire goblin was catching up with one of the debtors. Cook activated the dragon's eye. The protagonist asked if the player had been told as a child that playing with fire was dangerous, and the hour of reckoning had come. The guy wanted to deal with this loan shark himself. He asked Emily to switch to other enemies. Now the player is left alone with the goblin. He can have a blast on him. Gathering all his rage into a fist, Cadence hit the moneylender with all his might. One blow was enough. He dealt with the goblin in an instant, raising his level, and the main character also received a reward. It was a double contract. It was unfair from the start. It said that someone A had the right to force B to sacrifice something or work. B, in turn, is obliged to pay all kinds of bribes or give money. The merchants must have hidden the contents of the contract using a special item. The squad managed to deal with all the moneylenders. At the moment, the kobolds are not in any danger. At least, that's what the guys thought until a pink glow appeared around them. Apparently, the souls of the players. The kobolds also fell under the influence of an unknown spell, their souls leaving their bodies. The squad was confused about what was happening, but they were able to protect people from the attack of the usurers. Here, Cadence noticed the other side of the agreement, which stated that if problems with loan sharks arose, who came to collect interest from B, all powers of B are transferred to A, everything was provided for. The souls of the kobolds were mixed into one whole. They were intertwined with each other. After the transformation, the souls flew in a certain direction at lightning speed. This cannot be left like this. The squad immediately set off in pursuit of the flying souls. We must hurry. These children are in danger. Eventually, the chase led the team to the ghost train, and the boys were surprised by the find. Is the train still running? How is that possible? The squad looked in fascination at the light coming from the train. Previously, the composition was on the 10th line. But how could it end up here? Something is clearly wrong. Glenn immediately woke up. He felt a lot of food. It was necessary to feed the pet to his fill. A warning sounded throughout the station that doors were opening, and Cook quickly realized that this was another dungeon. Dreamworld features a variety of different dungeons, which are the main content of the game. Among them are so-called mobile dungeons in the form of carts or ships. As soon as the squad got here, this train was not here, so in front of the guys was one of the mobile dungeons. By this time the souls arrived, they flew right into the train window, which means they are heading to the dungeon. Cadence decided to consult with the detective on what they should do. Orson was also puzzled. Cook asked if the policeman realized that the train was underground and if the squad entered it. That could mean forever losing the chance to find any of the camp's survivors. If any of them had survived, they would not have passed by, and besides, there are no signs of a battle. Marshman accepted for himself that there was no point in chasing the ghost. They did not know if anyone from the camp had survived. First of all, it was worth saving the children. Their souls were now in danger. Cook completely agreed with the detective's opinion. After that, the squad prepared for a new adventure and entered the train. What choice did they have? Riley failed to obtain a boarding pass and became a target for station workers. Becker is only level 52. He is sure that he will not be able to survive in a D-rank dungeon. The young goblin spotted a stowaway and giggled maliciously. Today would be his day. He was quite agile and Riley couldn't even touch him. The goblin was clearly mocking the boy. Becker had no more stamina. These damned monsters don't attack, they just play. The quest failed. The character was unable to obtain a boarding pass. And now Riley has become a target for the station worker. The guy was terrified. A huge goblin was standing right behind him. The worker grabbed the stowaway with one hand and threw him into a dark room. The sound of chains thundered from the darkness, and then an unknown man screamed shrilly, causing the player to panic. Having become accustomed to the darkness, Becker looked around. There were many people chained up in the room. At the back of the train, the young goblins were annoyed that they had not had enough fun with the stowaway. After some time, new passengers entered the empty train. The young goblins had not seen people for a long time. The team members looked around and saw small enemies who were in no hurry to attack the guests. Goblins look harmless, but their level is definitely above 70. But this is exactly the race that has fun getting rid of people. Gibbs looked around and noticed some oddities, bringing them to the attention of the others. The place looked more like a freight car than a passenger car, that's right, because this is a Class D dungeon. Dungeons don't always match their appearance. For example, take the Fallen School, which looked like a normal school. But inside, it turned out to be clearly larger than expected. Looking at the view from the window, Cook noticed that they were not underground, but above it. This is clearly not a simple dungeon. As soon as the squad entered here, notifications constantly came. Soon, a station worker will come and start checking tickets. If there is no ticket, then the passengers will become the target of the station workers. This is a themed dungeon, and in order to clear it, players must understand the rules that are unique to this particular location. Having dealt with the young goblin, the protagonist received a reward in the form of a boarding pass. Emily Gibbs also completed the task fairly quickly, earning a ticket with one shot. After Marshman sent the young goblin on a long vacation and received a ticket, Harley was the last to get it. The team was puzzled by how quickly they completed the themed quest. The happiness didn't last long, as Cadence demanded that the squad throw out the tickets. They don't have time for a full-fledged raid. Apparently, the station worker starts catching stowaways. He starts at the back of the train, so why don't the boys lure him in? Glenn happily disposed of the tickets. Gibbs guessed that the main character was going to use them as bait. The squad does not know where exactly the children's souls are. And in order to find out and survive, they need to act unpredictably, because this is the only way they can catch the station employee. Francis wondered what to do with the young goblins who were hiding in the corners. He thought that the goblins were afraid of Mr. Carl, but Cook was smarter. The quest failed. The players became a target for the station worker. The station duty officer entered the tail section, and it was from him that the small goblins hid in the dark places. The worker approached Cadence and asked where his ticket was, to which he was told that the man had lost his ticket. The elder goblin wanted to continue that travel was prohibited without a ticket, but the main character got ahead of the monster and hit him. The opponent was on the floor in an instant. He didn't expect the stowaway to be so strong. The station worker couldn't stand being treated like that. He jumped up and wanted to hit the guy. Cook avoided the attack, deciding to take advantage of the opportunity. The protagonist grabbed the goblin by the horn and hit him in the face with his knee. With the enemy completely disoriented, Cadence delivered the final blow, ending the battle. The protagonist decided to clarify whether the goblin was really a station worker, but the local controller was in no hurry to answer the question. The squad did not expect such impudence from their comrade, especially in a dungeon of rank D. The player found the situation funny. In the end, they only had to defeat the elder goblin. Now they wouldn't have to worry about the ticket. The character sat on the controller and continued his interrogation. Cadence wanted to know where the monster hid souls. The goblin was reluctant to say where he had hidden the souls until Cook dreamed of hitting the person being interrogated. He immediately cracked. The station worker confessed that the souls were in the Don D, but he didn't remember anything else. Afterwards, the main character demanded the keys from the goblin because the worker no longer had to complete the quest. The controller did not want to give up the keys. Cadence decided to take them by force, but the goblin resisted. Then the guy decided to take extreme measures and sent the station worker on a short break. Cook stopped a station worker and even robbed him to boot. The goblin asked for it himself. The character received a hidden item. This is the key to Zone F. He returned to the team and said that it was time to move out. Marshman couldn't stand it. He started scolding Cook for his behavior. The goblin is also a player. Perhaps he also became a victim. It's not as simple as with a kobold. A person doesn't become a goblin even if his soul is stolen. To do this, you either have to kill your relatives or perform tribal feeding. That is, you have to eat a person. So the squad needs to forget about pity when dealing with goblins. It didn't take long to find a passage. The guys quickly completed this part of the plan. The team received an achievement. They earned the title of Speedy Dungeon Master. Experience points gained in the dungeon are increased by 2%. Orson started to worry if this was possible. He heard that you can't complete a themed dungeon until you finish the quest. Cook said that players decide for themselves how exactly they are going to conquer the dungeon. Either they play using the usual methods or unconventional ones. He continued to explain that players can use cheats, useful items, and sometimes Easter eggs from the system itself help. After passing through the passage, the team reached the safe zone F5, a rest area with trees. Entering the carriage, the detachment saw men peacefully dining at a table with tree branches growing above them, creating a cozy atmosphere. One of the men noticed the people who came in and was clearly unhappy with what he saw. Cadence looked around. In the far corner sat people chained by the neck. They were hungry and seemed to be under someone's control. Apparently, the squad met with the evil merchants that the kobold spoke of. The man asked with displeasure if there was a ticket. Cook confidently replied that there was no ticket. He knew what he was doing. The guy had thought out his plan. The evil merchant got on the same level with the guest, calling him a degenerate. The merchant was about to teach the guests a lesson. After a pause, Cadence asked if it was too hot today. The squad was confused. The man invited the boy to follow him. He understood what was being discussed and softened a little. The team was ready. The merchant brought the boys to the table and offered them a snack. They must have been tired on the way here. The squad finally stopped understanding what was happening in this place. Emily quietly took out a revolver. The team felt out of place. They didn't really want to eat, especially after the kobold story. The man introduced himself as Mr. Eccles. He is the boss here, and the young man next to him introduced himself as Kant. Cadence was glad to meet the traders. Marshman decided to find out what the guy was doing. The protagonist explained that the goblin's package contained one unusual item that caught Cook's interest. There lay the password for the resting place under the trees. The password was the phrase, "Isn't it too much today?" Honestly speaking, chasing souls is only half the trouble. The main thing is to find a way to return them back to the children. And to do this, we need to dig up information about the contract that was concluded with the children from these traders. While the team was distracted, young goblins appeared. But where did they come from in the safe zone? Mr. Eccles decided to clear things up, no matter how the guy knew the password, but it was last month. These bastards are too prudent. Cadence put on his gloves. The man ordered the goblins to destroy the guests. The gamer pulled out her revolver and quickly shot several monsters. The detective and Harley worked together. The merchants were afraid of the guy's strength. They dealt with the small goblins too easily. The merchants hurried to another zone. Marshman guessed that the bastards might try to escape and block their path, so the traders couldn't escape. The villains took out their weapons. They were sure that Marshman alone could not cope with them. However, one spear was enough for Orson to teach two merchants a lesson. When the traders were defeated, Cook said that he wanted to resolve everything peacefully, and now it was time for the men to start talking. Ackles called the team scumbags when they dared to challenge Jared. Cadence wasn't prepared to hear Jared's name here in the D-class dungeon. The merchant laughed. He was sure that the guy now understood what he had done, because he had just started a rebellion against Jared. These words made Cadence laugh. There was no point in him being afraid of Jared. He was only in 9th place in the ranking. The squad once again lost track of what was happening. Cook was clearly not telling them something. So what the merchants want to say is that Jared, that swindler, is now in that dungeon. Jared is the 9th-ranked merchant in the dungeon, having climbed to the top of the world without taking part in any combat. He is usually described as one of two things. Either Jared is terrible and you should never borrow money from him. Either Jared is reliable, a man who makes fair deals and honors the terms. And only with him could you find the best quality goods, and most importantly, he was ready to go to the ends of the earth for a client. In order to sell his goods, and then he suddenly disappears. As if Jared never existed, he charges a lot, of course. Cadence pounced on the merchant. Did he really want to say that this swindler is here? He stole expensive things by fraud. Foam poured from Eccles' mouth. He died instantly. Cook did not even understand how this could have happened. The soul flew out of the bodies, just like earlier from the kobolds. What the hell is going on here? The souls left all the merchants. The squad was perplexed. Now they were dead. This was again the work of some contract. Gibbs assumed it was all because of Jared. He clearly had everything planned out. He was acting like he was in a game. Francis couldn't believe that Jared could be so bad that he could calmly take people's souls. A pathetic bastard who deceives people while smiling. Emily lost her equipment because of him. It can't be. Could he really have deceived all the rankers? In this case, nothing concrete can be said. The squad was determined to deal with Jared, but first they had to free the people. Cadence was almost done when he noticed one that wasn't tied up. Moreover, there was someone interesting on it. This is an angel earring, a unique item of level 300. This thing has only one owner. The boy opened his eyes and was surprisingly friendly. Could this really be Jared? The team was ready to deal with the boy despite his age. However, the stranger began to claim that he was not who they took him for. He was not Jared. Cook asked where the angel's earring was from. The boy replied that he bought it. It was as beautiful as the angel himself. A bullet flew past the unknown person and entered the wall next to him. Emily didn't miss. She's ready to add 9 grams of lead to the boy's brain. There was no point in hiding any longer. The unknown person asked for forgiveness and asked not to kill him. He admitted that he really did outsmart all the rankers. But back then, he wanted to get more awards. Now he is ashamed. Cadence is not talking about the first part of Dreamworld, but about what happened here now. Jared asked for forgiveness from Mr. Carl. The protagonist became furious when Jared found out that Cook was Carl. Then the boy told his story. He ended up here while trying to catch an imposter who called himself Jared. Or rather, he followed Carl using GPS. Cadence didn't understand at all how the boy thought of using the navigator. It turns out that the sensor can track a specific player. Jared traded him for those items, and he also said that only with Carl could the boy earn a lot. Marshman couldn't get his head around it. Jared was 14. He was a schoolboy. Harley himself was in shock. Jared also recognized the shooter, Emily Gibbs, and decided to tell her that he was a big fan of hers. The girl was surprised that the fan knew about Gibbs's secret. He admitted that he constantly went to her meetings with fans. Emily remembered that she would never have guessed that that charming boy was Jared. He admitted that at first he thought the magic shooter was an old guy with a beer belly. Cadence asked who the imposter was, and Jared explained that there was a player posing as Jared and defaming his name. For 3 months, while the navigator could not find Carl, the boy wandered around the city. Then several merchants approached him. They told us that there is a second Jared who is defaming the name of the real ranker. The terms of the contract with them looked suspicious, but the schoolboy agreed anyway. They said that with the help of the angel earring, the contract could be terminated. Then Jared realized that they could make good money and followed them to find the imposter. And Mr. Eccles himself came here to join the auction house that the imposter is organizing. The house is some kind of storage, similar to the black market in the recently opened D5 district. There will be various rare items there. It turns out that they were going to sell these people there. They are now as if unconscious. Jared decided to find out if there was an alert when the traders died or not. They are red players. After death, they should drop items and give experience, like with monsters. But they are still alive. They just left their bodies. Their souls were transferred to another place. In other words, these people are something like vessels for souls, an additional life. And the organizer of all this, the people called him the owner of the goblins, but this is the same false Jared. Emily was surprised how he could be the owner of goblins, since they were impossible to subdue. Goblins have their own hierarchy. Each of them carries out the commands of the one above them. The only and most powerful goblin rules over the rest. His name is Luther. But the owner of the goblins was able to subjugate even the king of these creatures. But it was precisely because of them that all this began. So, we need to find the owner. The squad should hurry. Apparently, the squad is now not far from Zone E. Jared suggested a shortcut. It would take a long time to explain. He will tell you everything along the way. The shortcut was over the top. The team climbed onto the roof of the train and began their journey. Cadence wasn't thrilled with the solution, but the method was pretty quick. Jared knows which train car goes to the black market, and by refusing there, he could learn more. A notification popped up with a hidden task, but the student said that this was a safe path. The monsters are approaching. They must prevent the squad from reaching the desired carriage. These monsters are too agile. The guys will have to work hard to defeat them. Cadence put on his spiked gloves and prepared for battle. Jared warned that these monsters are ghosts and physical attacks do not work on them. Then the main character activated the skill of calmness. Now he can deliver attacks that concentrate all the mana at the point of impact. Thanks to the schoolboy's hint, Cook easily defeated the Spectra. All that was left was to get rid of the rest. But something strange started to happen. The guy heard Jared's voice, but he was nowhere to be seen. The schoolboy was behind. He can make almost everything invisible, which is why he was nicknamed a mirage. Now it is more important to understand how exactly to deal with these ghosts, and as quickly as possible. Cadence laughed. Was the boy really afraid that the monsters would defeat Carl himself? But there was another problem. If you get rid of all the ghosts, their mother will appear, namely a banshee rank D. All this time the shortcut was really here. Cook needs to warn his comrades. Emily had a hard time dealing with the ghosts. Bullets didn't work very well against them, and the girl had nothing but a revolver. Cadence covered his comrade. He tried to gather a squad and notify everyone so that the guys could run. It was useless to fight the ghosts. The comrades wouldn't like this approach. They didn't want to expose their backs to attacks. The team members demanded an explanation. They had not planned to flee the battlefield. The protagonist explained that if they get rid of all the Spectra, their boss, the Banshee, would appear. The squad is not in a position to fight her now, but she would be of great help. We must take advantage of the opportunity. A little later, Francis again acted as bait for monsters. His defense decreased by 7%. Harley's task, along with Orson, is to lure the specters. When he agreed to the task, he did not suspect that there would be so many ghosts. At the auction house, the false Jared was doing what he loved. Just look at the B-25 player, incredible speed, and how he was able to get past everyone. Player B-25 won. False Jared watched the battle of the players remotely. It was his favorite pastime. The subordinate who came to the goblin owner interrupted his master. Fake Jared was unhappy with the monster's arrival and asked what he wanted. The goblin asked to check the report, for which he received a hefty slap in the face from his master. He dared to spoil the false Jared's mood. Even the expensive wine lost its taste. The accomplice was wearing a goblin hat, which allowed him to subjugate and control goblins. Thanks to the hat's abilities, monsters are subordinate to the owner of the hat. Fake Jared was furious and rudely asked what his subordinate wanted to show him. The goblin reported to the gentleman that one of the station workers had been attacked and then robbed. The goblin showed a recording on the screen where Cadence deftly knocked down the controller and took the keys from him. It looked more like some kind of joke. The station worker was strong. Could there really be players in the dungeon who could handle such a colossus? Looking at the footage more closely, false Jared noticed a familiar figure. It was Emily Gibbs. The gentleman was shocked that such a famous person had come to visit him in the dungeon. This changes a lot, false Jared demanded to immediately catch the entire team. And most importantly, he ordered Emily Gibbs to be brought to him, and the rest could be finished off. At this time, part of the squad ended up in carriage D6, Jared, Emily, and Cadence. Gibbs was worried whether Hanley and Orson would be able to complete their task. There were too many ghosts. Cook stated that Francis had the strongest armor of anyone here, and the detective was well trained. The team stopped in front of the entrance to compartment D5. This is where you can make all your dirty desires come true. Behind this passage is a black market. Important note, everyone there wears masks to hide their identities. However, Jared only has one mask, and there are 3 people on the team, so something needs to be thought of. The schoolboy then lent Cadence his recluse cloak with the ability of invisibility. With its help, Cook will be able to easily enter the market and find information regarding the contract. This is not enough, but there is another way. Jared has a lot of interesting items. Zone D5, a black market casino, is home to a large number of elite players. And every single one of them was wearing masks. The players were discussing their plans, desires, sharing ideas. Cadence walked past the tables, quietly watching the people in masks. He had never encountered a dungeon where the main evil was people. It turns out the guy came here through a portal, not a door. The scale of this dungeon is amazing. Where to start my investigation? While wandering around the casino, the main character noticed a goblin who was looking around. He clearly did not want to attract attention. A shady guy, that's the one we need to follow. It seems Cadence found some kind of clue. At this time, Marshman and Francis were carrying out their part of the plan, which was not as interesting as that of the other part of the detachment. The detective noted that Harley was a good runner, and he couldn't fail Mr. Cook's mission. I wonder how things are going in the rest of them. The detective hoped that everything was going according to plan for the guys. Meanwhile, in Zone D5, Jared and Emily Gibbs stood right in the center of the casino. Could this really work? Emily wasn't sure how reliable the plan was. The goblin stood in the way of the guys. He mistook them for traders and decided to find out what goods the players were going to sell. Then Gibbs went ahead and took off her hood, which covered her face. What luck for the houseworker. It's Emily, whom Master Jared asked to bring. The goblin suggested going to a quieter place. The guys did not notice the trick and followed the worker. Cadence came to the dungeon where they kept various monsters and people. He had never seen them trade ogres either. Hearing footsteps, Cook threw a robe over his head and hid from prying eyes. And now more victims of the contracts have arrived. The prisoner's face turned out to be too familiar. It was Riley. The main character quickly remembered his comrade. Luckily, he's still conscious, but he looks very bad, and the time to save everyone, including Becker, is running out. He had to tell the detective, but a little later, there were other things to do now. Cadence mentally asked Riley to wait a little. Now we need to find a goblin who is aware of all the local affairs. The guy began to look around. A red prison worker caught my eye. He was very suitable for this role. Cadence threw off his cape and attacked the prison worker, something the goblin was not prepared for. The enemy received a powerful blow to the face. He did not even understand from which side the enemy approached. Emily was worried. She asked Jared where the goblin was taking them. The schoolboy suggested that he was taking them to the auction house. The high doors opened in front of the guys. They came. Jared thanked the worker. Opening the door, the light fell directly on the one the schoolboy had been hunting all this time. The fake Jared sat on a luxurious chair, with what appeared to be a goblin standing behind him as a guard. Could it really be a third-rank goblin? The guys realized that things were bad for them. The schoolboy recognized the scoundrel. It was he who was pretending to be Jared and ruining the merchant's reputation. And he's wearing a goblin hat. Everything fell into place. Now it's clear why the goblins obey him so easily. The goblin lord recognized the girl, and his subordinates quickly completed their task. Jared's thoughts were on the hat, which he knew was not how it was used. Fake Jared was furious. He demanded to bring only the girl. What is this hamster doing here? Apparently, it was too much for this worker, so Jared falsely ordered Luther to get rid of the unnecessary trash. Jared asked to give him a little time. He wants to talk to the main merchant of the dungeon. The goblin lord motioned for Luther to stop. It seemed the boy knew who he was. Jared said he knows. Any merchant knows the main merchant of the dungeon. So, the boy didn't just show up here for no reason. Fake Jared likes this kind of thing. He offered the schoolboy to have a drink with him. The player agreed. Who was he to refuse the fake Jared? Besides, he had such serious security. The guests sat down at the table hesitantly. The chief merchant asked them to relax. There was no poison in the wine. Then he asked why the hamster was looking for him. Jared wanted to talk about an exclusive sales agreement. The client would like to receive high-quality goods, but without having to deal with an auction house. The goblin lord said that this would require a lot of money, so Jared offered a tidy sum. 10 million gold. And when did the schoolboy manage to earn so much? Although what's surprising, he is Jared, the 9th place among all the dungeon traders. However, this was not enough for the goblin lord. He wanted a more reliable client. Unfortunately, the guys can't reveal his identity. It's enough for the fake Jared to know that the client is a very famous person in the Ark. The stranger's words interested the chief merchant, which meant the Ark. It must be about him. Did this trick with throwing in a famous name really work, and did the false Jared get hooked? The goblin lord asked his subordinate to bring the prepared papers. Hearing about the prepared papers, Jared became wary. The chief merchant reassured the guest. He just knew that they would try to contact him. The schoolboy still decided to sign the contract. It was a huge mistake. Who better than him knows that you can't trust a merchant? A chain appeared on Jared's wrist. The chief merchant asked not to be offended. He wanted at least some guarantees that he would not be deceived. The double contract was activated. Jared's body became the property of another person. the inventory also became the property of another person. A player named Jared now has control over Nick Collins' body. But the Goblin Lord was very wrong. He was not the only one who took care of everything in advance. Something terrible started to happen. Pieces of the ceiling started to fall to the floor. Fake Jared was in a panic. And this is already Nick Collins' guarantee. Ghosts began to fly into the room. One of the spectra held a sword to the chief merchant's throat. He wasn't the only one who knew how to play a double game. As soon as the false Jared uttered Luther's name, the third-rank goblin dealt with the ghost. Did the guests really hope to deal with Luther with the help of a pathetic spectrum? The chief merchant gave the order to the goblin to finish everyone off, and he also got his other subordinates involved. Harley and Orson arrived at the scene just in time. Their plan worked perfectly. Fake Jared was furious. He activated the double contract. The schoolboy's body began to glow. But the chain on Nick's hand broke. He felt fine. The Goblin Lord was perplexed. False Jack couldn't understand how the boy got rid of the contract. But Collins replied that the contract simply disappeared. Although Jared is just a fake, in his place, Nick would be worried about something else. The chief merchant's ward destroyed all the ghosts, thereby summoning her. Next to false Jared is the Harbinger of Death, the mother of Spectra, aka the Banshee. The prison guard was lying on the floor. He had taken a good hit on the head from the guy. Cadence couldn't wait forever for the goblin to come to his senses. It was time to answer questions if he didn't want to lose his horns altogether. First, Cook found out where the contracts were kept. They were kept by Mr. Jared. The goblin revealed that he was actually a player, but was tricked into becoming a goblin, and because of Jared's hat, he has no choice but to obey orders. However, Cadence knew this. He defeated the goblin, the second-class guard, and moved on. Now we need to hurry and help the others deal with the Goblin Lord. The Banshee looked quite menacing. She is a ghost that came from hell. Her special skill is howling. The guys heard different voices, probably the screams of dead people. This is how the boss disorients the enemies. This ghost was useful to the group as an ally, but suddenly the screams stopped. It turns out that the false Jared is able to subdue even such ghosts. The squad made a mistake. On command, Luther rushed into battle with Banshee, an incredible shockwave. Collins even had to use a barrier. The other goblins couldn't withstand the shockwave, but it's good that the squad was able to stop it with the barrier. It seems like the team can't even get into this fight without his help. Towers called Luther a king without a kingdom. As it turns out, the ghost boss is very fast and able to block many of his attacks. At this rate, she would easily defeat him. Suddenly, the Goblin King's chain broke. Fake Jared yelled at the goblin that he was a pathetic freak and that he needed to fight better or the Banshee would win. The master ordered Luther to protect him. Then the goblin entangled the Banshee with a chain and threw her aside. The ghost boss was defeated, after which false Jared ordered Luther to swear allegiance. Looking at the broken chain, the Goblin King headed towards the boys. The master ordered to finish them off. The gamer opened fire on the monster with a revolver, but it regenerates too quickly. Emily's level is not enough. Just as Luther was about to attack the boys, his hand fell to the floor, cut off by someone. Cadence managed to protect his squad in time. His comrades were glad to see the #1 ranker. Cook hoped that the Banshee would at least be able to put pressure on the goblin. There was something interesting lying there. The protagonist returned the robe to its owner and rushed towards his goal. The Goblin King can fight well even without an arm. That's truly the power of a third-rank goblin. The detective suggested leaving the king to Cadence. He would certainly cope. We need to deal with double contracts. Nick Collins opened his inventory and took out the sheets. These were the very contracts. False Jared didn't understand how his items ended up with the real Jared. Nor did he understand how the schoolboy outsmarted the merchant. Angel Earring, anyone who dares to lie to the owner reflects their lies against themselves. Player Nick Collins has the right to dispose of Jared's things and body. A chain appeared on the wrist of the false Jared. The boy showed the contract to his accomplice. Now all his things and even his body belong to Nick. Why is he so surprised? It's written in the contract. Now the false Jared has become Nick's slave, which means that the hat that controls the goblins no longer belongs to the accomplice. The schoolboy took the hat from the head of the former Goblin Lord. Now the criminal is deprived of all his trump cards. Collins wondered what Jared's partner would do this time. He was furious. False Jared ordered his worthless degenerates to move and kill the guests. Francis asked Nick to quickly put on his hat and become the Goblin King, but this is impossible. Existing goblins are subordinate to their original master. They are connected to him by their souls. But there is one way out. It is to defeat Luther, then the goblins will stop obeying the false Jared. The Goblin King is too strong. With one blow, he threw Cadence into the wall. The strongest Class D monster, Cook is obliged to defeat him, despite the fact that he is no match for the goblin. Maybe it will work if you try to knock down the goblin boss. I have to try. Collins shouted to his comrade that he had the hat that controlled the goblins. If you defeat the monster, it will become the Goblin King itself, and no one will be able to control it. Fake Jared chuckled. Did the guy really think he could defeat a ranked monster with the help of this stick? Luther received an order to destroy the annoying enemy. The goblin is ready to fulfill the master's order. The goblin boss prepared to attack the human, while Cadence prepared the banshee's ghost scythe. The monster's blow was stronger than the protagonist could withstand, so he activated the dragon's eye. Now he can see the chains that are chained to the boss's soul. All that remains is to cut them. The goblin turned out to be too heavy for the character. He still wouldn't be able to fight the boss for long. With such a strong opponent, you need to hit a specific point. You will need a sharpshooter here. Emily Gibbs was ready and fired straight at the goblin leader's head. Fake Jared found it funny that the humans were seriously hoping that they could defeat such a powerful enemy with one bullet. At this moment, the criminal's body itself flew into the air. The new owner controls the player's body, Jared. The goblin leader was heading straight for Emily, but his master was in the way, and the monster hesitated. The best moment to break the chains that keep the boss out of control. False Jared demanded that his subordinate finish off the guests, but he did not move. Now the contract with the monster is invalid. After activating the dragon's eye, the protagonist broke the chains. Therefore, the main target of the Goblin King was the former owner who deprived the boss of freedom. As a goblin, he swore allegiance to the king. He had to follow any orders without question. However, this natural connection caused a lot of pain. Now the false Jared is not the king. Finally, the chief goblin was free. His roar was enough to make the others kneel. The monster killed his former master with particular cruelty. He had long dreamed of this. Now it was Cadence's turn, but he asked to slow down. Why should the opponents waste their energy? There was no point in them fighting. This arrangement did not suit the goblin leader. His only desire was to kill. Cook had no choice but to put on the goblin hat and receive the title of Goblin King. The guy asked the monster for forgiveness, but there was no other way. The goblin himself did not agree to a truce. Something didn't go according to plan. The hat seemed to stop working. The goblin doesn't obey. Cadence activated the dragon's eye. There is something in the goblin's body that prevents me from obeying. The goblin boss has gone completely crazy. Something terrible is about to happen. The monster's severed arm was restored, and he became even stronger than he was before. The goblin hit with such force that the shockwave knocked the guys off their feet. They were terrified by this force. Afterwards, the monster took its former owner, who was breathing with his last strength, and devoured him. An error warning popped up. The system is checking the status of the malfunction. The boss started to destroy everything around him. He hit with such force that all the players were thrown into the air. Having calmed down, the monster stood up. It seemed like the real Goblin King had appeared. A notification popped up. A new boss had appeared. At this time, 2 people entered the luggage compartment. They were surprised at how little was stored there, only enough for a week. They were surprised at how easy the task was. There weren't even any goblins nearby. In any case, they had to hurry. They are from the intelligence service. The Ark is in crisis. There is no time to think. Unexpectedly for themselves, the scouts discovered surviving people, 2 of whom realized that Jared was engaged in human trafficking. However, they did not have time to save the survivors. They could not waste precious resources in such a dangerous place. However, it was too late to escape. The scouts became victims of the enraged boss. The boss doesn't even pay attention to the squad. He's busy with his own affairs. It seems that the Goblin King has been able to evolve. This is clear from the system notification. He is now a C-class. The detective was sure that this was impossible. It was impossible to evolve into a boss without leaving the dungeon. Cadence thought, purely in theory it was possible. In the first dream world, no one had managed to achieve this yet. Common sense clearly doesn't work here. The system has generally identified what happened as an error. Either way, the goblin is now a trigger that the team has already encountered. Although he was able to evolve, he has completely lost his mind and only moves to achieve his desires. And he has only one desire, to become as strong as possible. He hasn't fully pumped up yet, but the boss is clearly a C rank. It does not carry a virus that causes disease and increases the number of triggers. In the first part, there were studies related to achieving evolution for different types of characters when interacting with spores, but everything ended in failure. But now they are not in the first dream world, but in the second. Perhaps other changes were applied to it that were not in the first part. The strange glow in the neck area alarms the main character the most. Francis said that it was useless for him to fight against the boss now while he was in such a guise. However, there is something else that can help you win this battle. Cadence spilled his blood on the goblin's hat and it activated one of its demon abilities. The guy began to look like a real demon. My appearance changed. If you want to catch a monster, there's nothing left to do but become a monster yourself. The owner of the hat with this ability can control souls. Depending on the number of souls used, the size and strength is determined. It's like using souls as a shield. Maybe among those souls there are those children. Cadence took the blade of regret Virgil. As expected, it can be used with the demon skill, especially since the sword belonged to the undead. The detective was worried about his friend and asked how he was feeling. But Cook asked him to move away so that his comrades' souls would not be sucked in. A demon's level will vary depending on how many souls it controls, and this one has clearly absorbed a lot. However, he did not gather them all by his own will. The ability itself appeared because of the goblin's hat. It was time to end this once and for all. Cadence bravely rushed into battle. The main character was able to cut off the goblin boss's hand. The fight will be tough. Goosebumps ran down the guy's spine. He needed to quickly find the monster's weak spots and kill him. Scouts peered out from a hole in the roof of the train and were surprised by what they saw. They didn't expect the hero to be human. They don't understand at all what's going on. There was no time for talking. Cook advised to run as far as possible if people wanted to stay alive. The character lost his vigilance. He spent too much time talking. The boss managed to come up from behind. It is not surprising that the monster wants to quickly devour the main character, because he has so many souls in stock. Cadence activated the dragon's eye. That thing on his neck was bothering him. It was probably the problem. With difficulty, avoiding the boss's attacks, Cook reached the neck and tried to cut it. A dungeon flower emerged from the wound, and this is where things got more interesting. Just think, someone thought to plant a dungeon flower on a monster. Taking a closer look, the guy realized that these were not the harmless flowers that the team had encountered earlier. There must be a virus involved that speeds up the object's evolution process. People from the company are clearly involved in this. The flower is at the center of Luther's life force. It's time to shorten the boss. He's too tall. The guy tried to chop off his legs. The Blade of Regret's exclusive ability is needle like frost. It's no longer possible to use the demon. It's time to finish with the monster. Cadence was very tired. Would he be able to finish the fight? Then Gibbs came to the rescue. The girl decided to fry the enemy. She hit the target exactly, namely the flower. Now the goblin is caught. More effort must be made. The souls began to leave Luther. They only got out of control because Cook hit the center point. The character, on the contrary, tried to make the souls weaken. He clearly did not expect such an effect. If there are too many souls of the accumulator, they may begin to try to find a vessel for themselves. As is known, the undead themselves instinctively attack a person. This could lead to a bloodbath. There's not much time left. The souls must be subdued. The guy lost a lot of strength due to the recent battle, and he's not even a goblin. Here, the main character's eyes fell on a third-class goblin. Goblins are one race that can control souls. This hat is designed to allow goblins to evolve into demons, a risky plan. After all, if the goblin fully evolves, it will be impossible to stop him. So be it, let the Goblin King lose weight. The main thing is that he calms these souls. There was a strange sound. It seems like goblins started hunting their own. Just think, eating so many souls, because of the desire to become stronger. All eyes are directed to the goblin hat. These monsters used to send souls to the country world. However, each of them wanted to become stronger by eating their own brothers over and over again. Eventually, someone created the Goblin Cap to control all this madness. The souls screamed and blamed the Goblin King, but he himself did not want to be one. The king asked to leave him alone. The Goblin King did not wish to live any longer, but he heard a request to calm the souls. The goblin looked around in confusion, searching for a voice, and saw Cook. Finally, people remembered why they needed a hat. To stop the monster, the man used the demon's ability. This man is the real owner of the hat. The goblin was ready to carry out the order. The monster began to consider Cadence its master, the Goblin King. In the train carriage, the scouts tried to escape from the ill-fated dungeon. People couldn't understand what they saw. The monster looked like the boss, the Lizard King from the Class C dungeon. The scouts didn't know what to do. No one answered them. This was the first time the scouts had encountered such a situation. Sundance stopped, remembering the words of the man who looked like a monster. The man decided that the best thing to do would be to return to the Ark. Rail was indignant. Shouldn't the scouts at least check if people are alive? Chuck replied that they needed to leave this hellish place as soon as possible. Bug was upset. The ceiling began to crack again, and Sundance ordered them to leave if Rail wanted to stay alive. It was too late to run. The ceiling had collapsed and the fragments flew straight at the scouts. Chuck gave the order to run while they were alive and could still escape. Cadence fell lifelessly right in front of the people. He was unconscious. Sundance asked Bug to check if the guy who fell out of the sky was alive. A monster with glowing eyes immediately appeared and told people to get out of here. The scouts were panicked, but then they got a better look at the monster. The little monster tried to scare strangers away from someone dear to him. It turned out to be a baby goblin. Riley and Chuck were touched by the clumsy monster. Fake Jared's body was put together from small pieces. He had thought of everything. Even his possible death, the fake Jared remembered Nick and Cadence with bad words. He never would have thought that a third-rank goblin would be so helpless. Perhaps he didn't have enough souls. Fake Jared promised to pay back the people who overthrew his power. Let them see the true power of the company. A voice came down the hallway, wanting to know who had given the false Jared permission to act arbitrarily. Looking around, the character did not notice anyone except himself. He was alone in the corridor. The fake Jared's body was forced to bend over, not obeying the criminal's rules. Colin stood in front of the false Jared. He greeted his slave. "The boy will not let the liar die until he pays off the debt." Fake Jared angrily asked who the player was. How dare he touch a company employee? Nick didn't think long about what to answer. He promised to become a merchant, worse than a liar. Cadence was breaking through the army of souls. If things continued like this, they would eat the guy sooner or later. Suddenly, Cook found himself in bed, waking up in a cold sweat from a terrible dream. The little goblin was very worried about his owner. He sat for a long time by the main character's bed. The guy didn't expect to see Luther in such a harmless guise. He vaguely remembered what happened. The kid brought the owner up to date with the latest events. It turns out that the character had been unconscious for 2 days. Emily was glad to see her friend conscious. The squad had become closer lately. The girl said that the Ark's national intelligence officers saved Cook. Apparently the government is alive. Nick Collins just went there for negotiations. Things are not going well on the Ark. They have a big deficit related to food. And since they still haven't been able to clear the dungeon during all this time, it is now one of the largest in the city. In the middle of the conversation, Cadence remembered the survivors and asked Gibbs what happened to them. The squad found Riley, but he is in really bad shape. He has been through too much. He needs help. The detective personally decided to take him to the Ark and stay there until he fully recovered. There are still doctors there. Marshman feels guilty for what happened. The rest stayed here. There is no other way out for now. We need to gather strength. The little goblin was waiting for new orders from his master. Cook asked what happened to the children's souls. The subordinates saved the desired souls. They are in perfect order, but for now it will not be possible to return them. All the souls inside the hat are mixed up, so it is impossible to choose or pull one out, and the goblin's hat does not belong to the baby. As long as the master lives, the goblin's hat belongs only to him. It's all very strange. Starting with the fact that as a monster, Luther's name is highlighted in white. The little monster probably lost most of his powers trying to put the souls to sleep, so there's no point in giving him a hat. But there is another way out. For this, Cadence needs to have more royal grandeur. Nick Collins knows what Luther is talking about. The boy came straight from the Ark. Cook asked what was wrong with Marshman. He decided to stay there for now. Riley was in critical condition. Collins was followed by Pseudo-Jared. The guys were surprised that he survived. Looks like they're now connected by an angel earring. Nick tried and gave him a very bad deal. It's no wonder that every deal Jared makes is so clean, because of this earring, neither he nor the contractor can lie. The main character wondered if something was wrong here. How could the boy have fooled him if Jared already had the earring then? It was not possible to find out about the company of the scoundrel. He lost his memory. He must have used some kind of drug. It's time for Cook to learn more about royal grandeur. What Collins knows about it. I need goblin horns. They control souls with the help of horns. Just right, Nick knows where I can get such horns. The squad has officially received a request for cooperation from National Intelligence. Not far from here is the location of Bermuda. It is said that a team of ARK players who went there on an expedition have disappeared. The team leader, Captain Marlowe Carter, who had an accident, his most important last message was about the Goblin Ball. The Bermuda area is associated with goblins, and intelligence has asked the team to search the area. If it is truly a Goblin Ball, it could help bring back children's souls, but that would only work if it was made of horns. Cadence hasn't fully understood what this greatness is yet, but he knows one thing for sure. With this, he can become stronger than he is now. The guy's level has increased because he passed the Class D dungeon. Now he can safely use Virgil's Blade of Regret, even if the demon doesn't work. Bermuda is in Chamchil at the fair, where once there was joy and children's laughter sounded all day long. At the fair, the people who had set out on the expedition asked the captain to hurry. Danger was everywhere. Captain Marlowe Carter was running from the lizards. These monsters should not be here. They only live in the Ark. There was no breakthrough in this place, but there are also bosses here. Monsters, orcs, and all sorts of evil spirits. The captain felt sick. His stamina was at 0. He asked his comrade what that thing was called. The guy saw the Goblin Ball only in the first dream world. Most likely this object is somehow involved in the ongoing nightmare. There's no way that monsters can carry around any equipment that doesn't suit their stats. Steve Alford was concerned about the captain's condition. His life was in danger now. This was more important. We had to think about how to return. The squad will definitely return. They simply have to. Marlowe sincerely believed in it. But they were trapped. They had to make sure that no one could enter here. Cadence's squad, having gained strength, left the train dungeon. The guys headed to clear the new place. Nick decided to stay in the carriage and wait for his friends there. He wasn't particularly eager to go to that ill-fated place. The main character asked Collins to take care of the rest. This dungeon will remain on him for now. The boss of this dungeon is still a third-tier goblin, and since Little Luther belongs to Cook, the right to move the dungeon also belongs to him. The squad went on a mission. Emily lit up the dark room with her phone. There were no traces of either monsters or people. The atmosphere was eerie, and Francis was alarmed. Gibbs was glad to have the opportunity to finally visit the fair. Hanley was surprised. Had the girl never been there before? She made her debut at a very young age, so she could only dream of walking around such places without any problems. Cadence had already forgotten that Emily is the most famous idol in all of Korea. Absolutely everyone knows her. Finally, the guys reached the right place. Something here was somehow too clean. Could it be that no one else had appeared here? Emily and Hanley seemed to have completely forgotten that they are in a post-apocalyptic world. They were completely enchanted by the park. It turned out to be of enormous size. Their eyes ran in different directions. Even Cadence felt like he was finally back to normal life. The happiness didn't last long. Suddenly, a familiar sound was heard. It was time to return to reality. The protagonist activated the dragon's eye. There was a lot of suspicious energy wave around. The carousel started working. The horses began to swing up and down, and the music began to play. The squad is on alert. The monsters are approaching, and there are many of them. Cook took Virgil's Blade of Regret. There were a lot of people in the park. They were all happy, as if Dreamworld 2 had never existed. But they all seemed unreal. Cheerful music was playing from different sides. This is a real fairy tale world, full of hope and romance. The girl was confused. She didn't understand what was happening. Cadence was also confused. Suddenly, the fans recognized Gibbs. A crowd quickly gathered around the guys. They should not attract attention. Cadence used a smoke grenade. We need to quickly hide from people and take cover. Hiding in the smoke, the boys managed to escape unwanted glances. Something was fishy here. This way the squad attracts too much attention. They need to dissolve into the crowd and change their appearance. The team came across a school uniform store. It had been a long time since they had worn this backgammon. The little goblin found nothing better than to put a towel on his head to hide the horns. He matched it to the color of his skin. But Francis didn't want to change clothes. He loves attention and feels comfortable in his gear. Now that the squad doesn't attract much attention, you can look around. Luther noticed a tall tower. He didn't think that people were so great. The main character sat down on a bench. He couldn't even imagine that the fair was so big. Emily became sad, as if nothing had happened. She missed her normal life. Pleasant music is playing. People are happy, as if everything that happened was just a bad dream, and now they have returned to reality. While Gibbs was thinking about life and the huge changes in it, the girl was handed something. She looked at the ticket she had just been given, and upon closer inspection, she noticed something. It was published last year, and the ticket had the date 2022. Did the guys really end up in the past? Emily decided to check the date on her phone. No, they didn't go back anywhere. It's just that the place itself points to a certain moment in the past. It's all an illusion, like a breath of air that was so necessary, but it caused a lot of pain and regret. Gibbs was sorry that all this was really long gone. It was unlikely that the world would ever be the same again. Emily decided to take a selfie with Cadence, who would never have existed otherwise. The photo turned out quite cute. The girl will remember this magical moment for a long time. Even though it's an illusion, it turned out beautifully. There should be at least one photo. She looks so different from herself now, neither like the idol who performs on stage, nor like the magic shooter. The guys lost their vigilance again. The costumes did not save them. The singer's fans still recognize their idol. Caught again, now the team needs to quickly hide somewhere inconspicuous. Due to the large number of people, Hanley and Little Luther fell behind Cadence and Emily. They had to fight their way through the crowd to catch up with their comrades. They needed to find a quieter place. The guys didn't understand anything about what was happening. The illusion was too good to be destroyed, but it was time to figure out why everything was like this. After analyzing the situation with the help of the dragon's eye, Cook saw a Ferris wheel in the cabin you can hide for a while. Hiding from prying eyes, the squad began to think, this place does not look like a dungeon. Moreover, it looks too real. Moreover, it is much more reasonable than what has been happening in recent months. It was all very confusing, and Emily wondered where they could have ended up. This park is perfect for a themed dungeon. The protagonist thought so too. But when the squad entered the park, no one received notification about the entrance to the dungeon. Cadence felt uneasy. He criticized his friend's thoughts, but he himself could not come up with anything reasonable. The worst thing is the thought that this place is not real. The world has become too cruel. Millions of people have died, and in the park, everything is as before. Moreover, Glenn is drooling over the fantastic smell that pervades the area and is delighted by the beautifully prepared dishes nearby. And when the animal behaves like this, it means that there is a dungeon somewhere nearby. But the system says that the smell is everywhere. This is even more confusing. Everyone's brains are already boiling. We'll have to comb the park again in search of new clues, since the squad didn't find anything last time. Finally, a good idea came to the character's head. He suggested acting differently. Since this is an illusion of reality, then you have to play by its rules. Namely, Emily needs to do what she does best. There is a stage, a crowd of people and fans. What else does a famous idol need? Gibbs didn't really like the idea of holding a concert. She thought it was completely unreasonable. While the team was looking around last time, Cook noticed several strange streams of energy. But as soon as the guy got closer, they disappeared. So we need to attract the flows here. There are no other options yet. During this time, Francis and the baby finished with the stage. Emily had a condition. If the team was going to give a concert, then everything had to be at the highest level. Even though it is an illusion, the people here believe that everything is real. Cadence liked this approach. He knows Gibbs well as a shooter. Now he has the opportunity to get to know her as an idol. Smoke appeared on the stage. The spectacular performance began. The idol is ready to give her concert. What was happening on stage instantly attracted the attention of the audience. The characters recognized the motives of Gibbs's song. People started whispering. Someone said that they saw Emily in the park today. Then the idol came out on stage. The girl missed the stage and was glad for such a sudden opportunity. The crowd of fans began to shout the idol's name, and Gibbs felt at ease. All the people from the park came closer to the stage, and a large crowd of people formed. As soon as everyone started singing, it was immediately obvious that the most famous singer was performing. Even Francis began to involuntarily sing along to his comrades' songs. He was glad to attend her concert. It's time to work. The main character activated the dragon's eye. He needs to find the reason for all these oddities. Emily can't be the only one trying. The girl is clearly nervous, despite the fact that the performance is not real. And here the energy flows appeared, as the guy expected. They appeared with a large flow of people. Looking closely at the crowd, Cadence noticed that streams of energy were concentrated around large plush toys. These toys were both at the entrance to the park and on the carousel, but the character did not draw attention to this. They always appeared exactly where people gathered when they saw Gibbs. Maybe they don't like this attention. The main character warned his comrades that the enemies are close. The toys took out their weapons and walked purposefully towards the squad members. The toy dog walked and whispered under its breath that guests should ride the rides. The behavior of the guests and their unauthorized concert infuriated the monsters. The guys should not have interfered with their work. Cadence didn't let the monster attack his comrade. He effectively struck the monster. The guy asked not to interfere with the performance of the most famous singer in Korea. This arrangement did not suit the opponents. They intended to eliminate the violators. The teddy bear prepared to attack the idol's guard. The character was looking forward to the battle. Suddenly, the same sentence began to be repeated throughout the park, as if it had become stuck. "Welcome to the fair, welcome to the fair, welcome to the fair." Over time, the announcement began to repeat intermittently, and people began to disappear. The sweet illusion melted before our eyes. The sky around darkened. The world lost its colors. The squad returned to harsh reality. Emily was angry, whoever was behind this. This was too cruel a pseudo-reality. The calm before the storm was over, and returning to the second dream world was unpleasant. Ahead of them, a bunch of monsters rushed towards the squad. Some of them, surprisingly, were in armor. Cook has pulled out his Virgil's blade of regret. Time to send these monsters into oblivion. The squad leader asked the boys to be careful with the monsters. It is unknown what they are capable of. The team finds themselves in a monster party-themed dungeon, and things are now much more realistic. The dungeon wishes the guests a joyful and happy day. This is not the kind of entertainment the squad wanted. Cadence doubted if this was really a dungeon. The events that had happened were too strange. There must be a reason for all this, to explain all these oddities that defy logic. Having activated the dragon's eye, the captain noticed a plush bunny behind the crowd of monsters, meaning the toys had not disappeared. The hare was holding something strange in his hands. Perhaps this was the goblin ball that the team had come here for. As soon as the enemy noticed Cook's intense gaze, he immediately began to run. The guy rushed in pursuit. He couldn't let the hare escape in such a large park, otherwise the task would drag on. Cadence's plans were interrupted by Hanley, who could not cope with the monster bull and asked the captain for help. Little Luther also couldn't quite cope with such a number of monsters. His strength was not enough. Even for the magic shooter, there were too many enemies. The team needed its leader. The main character was at a loss. His goal was so close, but he could not abandon his friends. There was no choice. This time Cook let the hare escape, but not for long. He still has time to deal with the enemy. The guy can't let his people down. Arc, Zone 3, there are 2 guards with weapons on duty. They are guarding the peace of the city. An unknown person approached the gates. The guards armed themselves. It was unknown who had been brought here this time. The stranger in armor, of good quality. The people from the Ark asked the newcomer to give his name. The exhausted boy from Marlowe Carter's squad introduced himself as Elroy Fisher. The guards immediately contacted Charles Levin, who was surprised by the news that someone had returned alive from Bermuda. The captain interrogated the survivor about how he managed to escape and what happened to the rest of the squad. Elor explained that he managed to reach the Ark thanks to spatial movement. The rest are still locked up. The fair, located in the Bermuda area, as expected, turned out to be a huge trap. The group managed to find traces of the dungeon. The team estimated it to be no less than rank D. Charles asked the guy if he was sure. Fisher was sure that the dungeon was probably only rank C. Reinforcements were needed. There was no place for high-level players there. According to the guy, everything that happens at the fair is somehow connected with memory. The higher the player's level, the more toxic his memories become. The captain couldn't believe what he heard. Levin made a big mistake. He already sent reinforcements there, but the players are high level. About an hour ago, people from the company approached the fair's passage. They had their own plans for this place. This place never became a dungeon, although such attractions are perfect for this purpose. Gordon Taft, the commander of the third group, was hunting for Carl. He was not sure that the guy came here. However, his subordinate is confident in the data. Carl's squad captured the ghost train and arrived here. Taft would be perplexed. What were they thinking about? This place is called Bermuda. People often disappear here. Little is known about this area because no one has returned alive to tell the tale. That's where Carl went. He obviously knows something. The Bermuda region existed in the first dream world. Gordon began to hope that the source of the great power he was chasing after was hidden here. The third group is sure that she must protect him from Carl at any cost. The squad confidently ran through the fair gates. They had no idea what awaited them ahead. Taft was prepared for any monster, but he was clearly not prepared for what lurked beyond the gates. The players were speechless. They did not expect to see an ordinary world with its bright colors. Carefree children ran around the park. Their gentle and innocent world had not yet collapsed. Gordon couldn't believe what was happening. His male subjects' mouths dropped open in surprise. People couldn't understand what kind of place this was. Everything here was completely different, untouched, real. The group leader held his breath, not thinking about the fact that he might miss the ordinary world. Those buildings at the entrance, outside the fair, looked completely abandoned. But here, everything is as if nothing happened. Taft ordered the group to follow him. He intends to figure out what's wrong with this place. In such costumes, the squad attracted too much attention from those around them. The players heard familiar tunes. It was Emily's concert. Gordon was convinced that Cadence was here. They rushed to the stage. The people from the company were obliged to stop Carl before he gained power. Before the group had time to reach the stage, the colors of the illusory world spread out and endless night set in. What was happening made me think. But there was no time to think about it. The place was still too strange. Before Taft could come up with a plan of action, a huge wolf pounced on the commander. Having come to his senses, Gordon took control of his emotions and dodged the blow. The commander took up his weapon. The red player killed the monster in cold blood with a blow straight to the head. You can't let your guard down. There were too many monsters. They came out of nowhere. We will have to fight. The captain ordered the group to prepare for battle. They would face tough battles with monsters. Taft was ready to fight when he saw Carl. He wanted to meet him so much, and now this long-awaited moment has arrived. Gordon didn't expect to see his target in such a guise. There was something demonic about it. Gibbs fought bravely against a huge pile of monsters. The magic shooter did her job perfectly. Little Luther noticed that Mr. Cook would meet people who clearly did not come to help. A second-class goblin appeared nearby, and it greatly angered Luther, who with all his heart wanted to protect his master. How dare this impudent fellow go against his king, the lord of the goblins? The monster had no intention of signing in front of the kid. He simply threw his hammer at Luther. The third-rank goblin couldn't handle the blow. The baby flew back several meters and fell on his back. Luther couldn't believe that some bastard could defeat him. This was unacceptable. All goblins should obey him. Hanley couldn't allow his friend to be hurt. He grabbed the baby and ran away. Luther was unhappy with the rescue. He demanded a rematch. Francis explained that the monster would crush the mini-goblin with one hand. The kid was furious that he, a third-class goblin, was being whipped by a second-class goblin, and he demanded that the leather one put him on the ground. Suddenly, a giant monster appeared in front of Harley. It looked quite threatening. Francis was expecting the monster to attack. He is not a coward to run away from danger. The guy should have thought better about his decision. He wouldn't be able to stand up to such a strong monster. Emily, seeing her comrade's hesitation, ordered him to run away. Harley resisted at first, but Luther wanted to live on in this world for a while longer. Francis was surprised by the mini-goblin's desire to run away. He had just been eager to fight. Luther explained that now he is not as good at fighting as before. Most likely, Cook was right. While the third-class goblin tried to control all the souls, he lost his powers. However, Luther did not regret it, because he was following the orders of his goblin king. There was something wrong with Cadence. Francis sensed something was wrong with the situation. The main character activated the demon, but this time it was a little different, as if it wasn't Cook. In this form, next to Cadence, no monsters are scary, but then the guy tried to strike at Harley and Luther. The commander's behavior scared the boys. It was as if he really was becoming a monster. Harley couldn't believe that Cook didn't recognize his comrades and pointed his sword at them. The leader's energy was different from usual. Francis couldn't understand anything. Maybe he did something wrong. Then something strange happened. Another Cadence appeared. The real one. He fought the guys off from the fake Cook. The real commander asked the guys if they were okay. Luther didn't understand anything. There were now two kings who could be trusted. Cadence asked Luther to use the skill to make sure he was real and not fake. The kid activated the title of the Goblin King. Having identified the real one, he asked who the second player was who activated the demon. It was a good question. Unfortunately, the main character did not know the answer to it. He does not fully understand what is happening. Cook asked the guys to get ready. They would have to act quickly. The fake commander was preparing to attack. Cadence activated the dragon's eye to assess the situation. He noticed a crack. The protagonist used the skill Needle Frost and launched an attack against himself. The fake Carl was shattered into pieces, but this was clearly not the end. We must not let our guard down. The team had a moment of calm. They can breathe a little. They hardly have much time. The squad had a hard time. There were too many monsters. This place is teeming with oddities. Francis noted that it got dark too quickly, and the monsters were more active at night. Gibbs decided that it was better this way than fighting a whole horde. The team was worried about Cook's clone. They were like two peas in a pod, the same face. Ranker suggested that it was all because of the magical item, the goblin ball. Those toys were associated with oddities. After all, those incomprehensible waves began precisely because of that little thing that the rabbit was walking around with. Apparently, we need to find the criminal and take away the goblin ball. You can't trust anything you see here. Most likely, all the monsters are just an illusion, just like those people during the day, along with all the celebration at the fair. Cadence realized that the reason all the illusions appeared was the memories of the squad members. After the squad gets off the ghost train, Cook no longer turns into a demon. So no one here could know that the player was once him, but the members of the squad remember it. It is quite possible that this object somehow affects the memory of those present, changing the local reality. There was just one thing Cadence couldn't understand: why they singled out the memories of the demon. At first, the illusions were pleasant, in the form of a holiday at a fair, and then nightmares began, too real, up to a complete copy of the rancor. Then Cook decided to find out how the guys felt about the image of the demon, what they thought about him. That's where the clues came in. Harley and Emily thought it was amazing and even delightful. Luther thought the appearance was a little scary. That's the whole point. The emotion that makes it easy for anyone to drag the monster into reality, that's horror. Every person is afraid of something of their own. That is how all these monsters appeared in such large numbers. And a copy of Cadence in the guise of a demon appeared as an object of fear from Luther's memories. Suddenly it dawned on the main character that if the monsters he was afraid of appeared, what would happen then? Will that dragon from the tomb incarnate into a rank Z dungeon soon? And besides, Captain Carter must be around here somewhere. Otherwise the boys would hardly have recognized the goblin ball. In short, the party must find two things in this strange place: the captain and the goblin ball. The squad was distracted and didn't notice the attack on the players. Something fell right between Cadence and Emily. A huge centipede towered over the boys, an enraged monster, an insect that dreamed of snacking on people. Harley was in a panic. He screamed in horror. Apparently, this was his nightmare. It's strange that such a fearless player is afraid of insects. Francis was unable to fight. The group had to cover their comrade and finish off the monster. Gibbs decided to deal with the centipede. Such creatures do not scare her. It's a pity that no one has insect spray with them. The monster's weak point is the palate. You have to get closer to hit the target. Having chosen a more convenient place, the magic shooter emptied her entire clip into the centipede. The girl made many holes in the monster's sky. She did her job perfectly. The insect fell lifelessly to the ground. Cook approached Francis and asked how his comrade was feeling. When he was a kid, every time Harley's dad scolded him, he wrote his son down in a box, and these creatures were constantly crawling in there. Cadence was puzzled by this story. He would never have thought that Francis' father could film and treat him like that. There was no time to regret the past. Cook's thoughts were interrupted by Emily. Because of all this fuss, various monsters began to flock here, and the detachment's affairs are bad. The commander ordered the boys to prepare their weapons. The battle would not be easy. Francis heard a strange sound behind him. He looked back. What he saw left much to be desired. There was another monster there. All the team members turned around to look at the monster. There stood an aristocrat named Nozzle. He was not a player. This monster was here because of Gibbs. The girl hated this character because he reminded her a lot of a stalker. Apparently, not only monsters can appear, but also embodiments of other nightmares. The aristocrat took out his sword, preparing to attack the boys. Emily felt uneasy with such an opponent. Cadence, looking at his friend, decided to take Nozzle on himself. This monster is not scary to him. Gibbs warned that the aristocrat was level 200, if not higher, but the main character didn't care. Cook came face to face with his opponent. Nozzle tried to strike the guy, but the hero dodged. Level 200 means that it is even interesting for the commander. A great opportunity to gain a lot of experience. The enemy is strong. It is even difficult to damage him. He is agile and easily dodges attacks. But what if he cannot be defeated? However, after some time, Nozzle made a fatal mistake by striking Cook again. The enemy opened up and the protagonist had the opportunity to strike the aristocrat straight in the heart. Nozzle was defeated in an instant. Gibbs could breathe a sigh of relief. It was time to deal with the rest. Just as the team was about to set off to find Commander Marlowe, Emily suddenly noticed a rabbit. The attacker stood on a high platform. He was clearly a red player, and he had his own game. Cadence activated the calm skill. This time, the criminal will not get away from the guy. The main character couldn't let the rabbit escape this time. He can't run forever. The guy intends to get the goblin ball. Surprisingly, the enemy was not very fast. Cadence managed to grab the rabbit by the ear. Cook took a step that was unexpected for the enemy. He simply decided to throw the enemy down, depriving him of support under his feet. The guy didn't expect that the ball would fly down together with the rabbit. Cook wouldn't have time to save the ball from destruction. Harley was on hand to help, and he rushed to save the fragile, valuable item. Francis did his job and prevented the goblin ball from falling to the ground and breaking. However, the final victory was prevented by a small stone. The player lost his balance and the ball was snatched from his hands. A bear appeared from nowhere and grabbed the ball from the guy's hands, and it all started to resemble a game of tag. It was necessary to find out who these people were and what goals they were pursuing. Cadence ran after the bear along the roof. Ranker did not manage to notice the danger in time, and the roof under his feet collapsed. He lost his balance. And then he appeared, the owner of the dungeon of level 3, level 500. Cook planned to get the ball before he appeared. Despite all the horror of this monster, Cadence has no time to panic. Only he can cope with the dragon. A clown began to laugh from the darkness. A guest appeared. Clowns are always bad news. No one likes clowns. Boss Velazar, the protagonist, was expecting to meet him, so this meeting was not a surprise. The boys were horrified by Cadence's nightmare, but their fears were nothing compared to the dragon. The commander ordered the team to leave as quickly as possible. He would buy time for the guys. Francis did not want to leave. The level 500 boss was already behind and was preparing to devour the main character. Emily screamed. Thanks to the girl's warning, Cook managed to jump away from the monster, and the shockwave threw the guy back several meters. The attack was so strong that even the squad was blown up. Now everyone is afraid of Cook's nightmare. Harley took the worst of it, but he could still fight. Gibbs was worried about Cadence. The ranker had no choice but to take on the form of a demon, otherwise he would not be able to win. That's what the squad members thought, but as it turned out, it was a copy of Cook, and the situation became much more interesting. The clone was an exact copy of the guy. It was as if he was looking in a mirror. It couldn't help but amaze. Apparently, the second Cadence was determined against the dragon Velazar. This is a real hope for success. The monster's attacks were terrifying. Their resolving power terrified everyone present. If the boss hit the guys, then a pile of ash would remain of them. The copy of Cook fought with dignity against the level 500 monster. The squad was left to watch from the side. Little Luther was amazed by the former power of his beloved lord. He could not believe that this was how His Majesty had been in the past. Francis couldn't understand why the enemy stood against another enemy. The boy didn't understand what was happening. Someone must have summoned this character. There is someone here who fears Velazar more than the main character. It seems that the monster is unable to use its full power, meaning that it is currently attacking at half strength. If Harley had met the real Velazar, he would have fallen down just from looking at him. But his skills are the same. The dragon uses endless flames of death, black smoke. This means that the characteristics of the weapons with which you can deal with the boss remain the same. And since Carl doesn't have such a weapon, he actually lost this fight, and this beast somehow finished off Cook. Because he was without the necessary weapons, but even if Carl couldn't win, he could at least buy time. Now the squad must find the goblin ball before it is too late. This is the best moment. The enemy may think that the team is busy fighting the monster. There is no time to waste. The monsters that stood in his way were practically harmless. The main character cut them down on the run. The captain asked the guys to be careful, as real hardcore could start from here. An illusory Carl stood in front of the squad. Yes, he is everywhere. Apparently this is a second copy, to stop the group. But that's not all. The first Carl Velazar raised too much noise. Now more monsters will arrive here. Clearing this place turned out to be more difficult in every sense than conquering the dungeon train. It seems that Carl has become even stronger than at the first meeting, apparently having eaten several souls during this time. Emily hinted to Cadence that it was time for the guy to teach his pathetic copy a lesson. The player did not get the hint. The girl said directly that the ranker should also become a demon to equalize the forces. The others supported Gibbs's idea, demanding that the commander take his strongest form. It turned out that everything was not so simple. A demon is a skill for using a soul. Now there are children around who can suffer. The main character faced a difficult choice. The enemy was very strong, but innocent people could suffer. Gibbs began to put pressure on the captain. There was no time to think. There had to be another way. Cook decided not to endanger the children. He couldn't do that to them. The commander rushed into battle with the opponents. Emily was disappointed with Cadence's choice. Suddenly, the fight was interrupted by a bright light that illuminated everything in the area. The main character stopped. It was a green car that knocked down all the monsters in its path. The car stopped right in front of the guy. Cook was perplexed. The very idea of what was happening was crazy. The driver was Captain Carter from the Ark. It was his team that came to save them. It turned out strange. In the end, the captain himself saved the guys who were trapped by monsters. Cadence thanked Marlowe for saving him. He came just in time. The light from the headlights scared the monsters away. But the monsters can't stand sunlight, not just electric light. Carter noticed the detachment during the day, but he could not drive up because he was looking for that very light. The Jeep effectively dealt with crowds of monsters. Just think, since the release of Dreamworld, many have forgotten about cars. First, the captain saw Emily. He was pleasantly surprised. The fact that the guys gave a concert amused Marlowe. Such abrupt driving of Harley began to make him feel sick. He tried to switch to make it easier. The man said that he had been trying all night. But the conversation was interrupted by a knife being thrust into the roof of the car. As it turned out, not all monsters are afraid of sunlight, which greatly complicated the course of events. As expected, it was a double and even took a pistol shot calmly. Cadence, having torn out door cars, jumped on roof to Carl. Main hero decided figure out with copy once and forever. Charles decided pounce on Cook, but Boy grabbed enemy for hand and threw over through shoulder. Copy turned out to be V unprofitable position. By what player is in the lead V battle? False tried stand up. Having recovered from blow, he looked on his own enemy. Cadence wasn't going to wait. He didn't let Carl get up, slamming his face into the roof a couple of times. That's it, the games are over. Now Carl won't stop people from continuing their mission. Cadence lowered the copy's head to the lantern with sunlight. The guy became curious about what would happen to him. As expected, the light incinerated the enemy. Carl crumbled into pieces and disappeared. The main character stood on the roof and looked at the distant fair due to the fight with monsters. Some elements were destroyed. Cook decided to take the remaining souls from Carl for himself. The ranker still hopes to save them. All souls rushed to the player. Now they are safe. They will not be used as a human shield. He waited patiently for every single soul to gather. Cook wanted to save as many lives as possible. Now the souls are in safe hands. The ranker does not yet know a way to save people, but he will definitely find one. The captain decided to check how things were going and stuck his head out of the hatch. Cadence replied that they could continue on. The team went to a safe place, to a hiding place. It was there that Carter's squad hid from this cruel location. People were waiting patiently in the cache. Some were wounded, but overall the team had escaped without losses. Captain Marlowe entered the hiding place. He was glad to see his men. The squad was glad to see their leader alive, and the members rushed to Carter. But then Emily Gibbs entered the hiding place. All the men immediately began to fuss, and they brought her a healing potion. Marlowe was amused by this and asked one of the men if they weren't at all worried about their captain. The guys immediately started asking questions about where the reinforcements were and why the players were there at all. Here, Carter stood up for the guys. He explained that a Class Z monster had appeared outside. The captain said that Carl and the dragon he summoned fought like madmen in the duel. People were surprised. Could it be that Carl himself came here? Could it be that he was here now? It seems they really believe that the Carl on the outside is the real one. People don't even suspect Gibbs's game personality, but that's not the main thing right now. Carter said this was their chance while Carl was fighting the dragon. Velazar. He shouted that the squad must immediately capture this dungeon. Are they really saying they found the goblin orb? Cadence thought the team wanted to escape from this place. Marlowe confirmed Cook's words. They really found the item they needed. Carter led the player to a familiar object. The main character was very surprised by the technology of Carter's team. Did they really think of patrolling the territory? With the help of the drone that is now flying over the fair, the people of the Ark have not erased new technologies from their lives. One could only dream of such a find in the first dream world, but now it can be used. Moreover, the drone can fly beyond the fair. The guide told Marlowe that he was almost there. Cadence was very interested in Carter's team's mission, as he was also hunting for the orb. The drone flew to Laffy's tower. Cook asked if it was possible to fly closer. However, it is impossible to approach the building. since the squad will lose contact with the drones, as if they are in another world. A dungeon, but it's not like all the others. It has completely different rules. There is no entrance or exit. It looks like just a hole, even somewhat reminiscent of a black hole. Something went wrong. The video quality became very poor. He stopped responding to the guy's commands, and the player started getting nervous. The drone began to lose altitude. The guy could not take control of it. Cadence wondered if it could be a monster attack, but the boy didn't think it was an attack. Here a very interesting detail was captured on camera, which provided answers to many questions. A human leg. Cook asked if he could see who it was, and that's exactly what the drone did. The guy was able to lift the camera up, and the main character saw familiar figures. The company, maybe it was they who summoned the Dark Carl, that would explain a lot. Taft destroyed the drone in one move in the most brutal manner possible. The drone was furious. His toy was destroyed. Now the squad lost the ability to observe the fair. Emily asked if this dungeon could belong to the company, but it is unlikely. If they had really created this place, Dark Carl wouldn't be here. In any case, this group must be stopped. Red players should not exist in this world. Captain Carter heard a little extra information that he wasn't supposed to know at this point. Hope slowly faded from Marlowe's eyes. He thought the squad was protected. Carter couldn't understand who had called whom, or if someone had called Carl. It seems like it's time for Cadence to tell it like it is, starting from the beginning. Taft's group didn't want anyone to notice them. But something went wrong. The captain didn't know whose drone they had stumbled upon. Those people barely escaped from the Dark Carl. Gordon's thoughts were interrupted by one of his subordinates, who pointed out something incomprehensible to the leader. He has seen many portals, but this is the first time a red player has encountered one like this. One thing Taft knows for sure, here, in this very place, all the power of the Bermuda Triangle is concentrated. This chance only comes once. If they take advantage of it, it could very well become their weapon. What if there were more creatures like Velizara? The red players wouldn't have to fear Carl. Even if something goes wrong, there's nothing stopping you from blowing up this place. You can make a breakthrough with the help of the Dungeon Flower. The company's mission is to promote dungeon breakthroughs by accelerating the conversion of weak dungeons with the Dungeon Flower. But the members of the organization also study them and turn them into weapons against players. One of such dungeons is the D-Class Ghost Train, which is the main achievement of the first group. If this works, Taft will reach the same level as the first group and earn bonuses at the same time. Gordon asked if everyone in the group was ready for promotion, and the entire squad shouted in the affirmative. The group was about to head to the portal to enter the dungeon when suddenly, Taft's plans were interrupted by someone, but he was so fast that the squad did not immediately see the enemy. It was a player in a bear costume. People were completely confused. The toy character ran into the portal, hiding from the eyes of Taft's team. Gordon was furious. He asked his subordinates why they were standing there. Carl would be arriving very soon. The players quickly understood the commander's hint and ran into the dungeon. The portal was left completely empty. All the players had gone into the dungeon. A huge monster with a big belly stood in the path of the squad. He really wanted to deal with the people. Cadence, along with Commander Marlowe, decided to deal with the monsters as quickly as possible. Cook dealt with the huge monster in 3 counts. Carter didn't even have time to start. The commander, along with Dylan, were amazed by Carl's power. They didn't expect that they would one day encounter the legendary Rancor. Carter approached the main character. He asked if it was still necessary to look for the Goblin Ball. If the team didn't know where exactly the dungeon was, then they would have to look for it, but there is no need. There must be a monster in the dungeon itself involved, as once the group successfully completes the raid, it will disappear, leaving the orb without an owner. Then Gibbs had an idea. What if those guys in suits appeared precisely because of the dungeon breakthrough and were in no way connected with it? Then nothing would happen to it during the cleanup. The dungeon is too big. Apparently everything happened because of the power that is in it. Harley wondered if this was even possible, but Cadence had no answer. He was just guessing. We must not forget that the guys are in a world where Seoul has become a location in the game. If players solve the dungeon problem, they will be able to deal with the masked guys, the fake Carl, and even the dragon. In regular dungeons, you can get a description of the location itself. But here, the situation is different. Here, for some reason, everything seems very familiar to the main character. He thought about trying again, but then something strange started to happen. Unthinkable streams of power filled everything around, something very powerful. Cook crouched closer to the ground, the streams of energy swirling into a circle. An unknown force awakened on the territory of the fair. A huge cannibal flower appeared in front of the squad. The monster decided to eat the people who were standing right in front of him. He was very hungry. Ranker couldn't allow his people to suffer. He dealt with the monster in an instant. A new quest appeared. The team was confused. The quest is right here. Quest transformation of the dungeon. Category unknown. A parasite appeared in the fair location. If all conditions are met, the system will create a theme park of the puppeteer Mary's dungeon. It is necessary to leave the fair where the dungeon is located. All conditions must be met. The reward will be life. The punishment for failure will be death. 3 unknown people, 3 men and 1 girl, emerged from the ghost train. The man thanked the man for giving the squad a ride to the right place. Jared began making money from the ghost train, using it as transportation. The man was perplexed. The boy was so young, and he had already set up a business, captured a dungeon, and now he was even driving around in it. The team went about their business. Soon they would enter a place where high-ranking players should not be. Besides, no one played the first Dream World. This means that there are no old people with a lot of experience among them. And that's why the squad is here, because their experience is only in what they were able to handle on their own. The only problem is that the team doesn't know if those 2 best, Carl and the magic shooter, came here. The squad members still couldn't believe that the magic shooter was Emily Gibbs. If they are truly invincible, then we can consider this a first-class danger zone. Oddities awaited help already at the entrance to the fair. The entrance was blocked. It was definitely open before the squad arrived. Nothing can be done. The entrance is blocked. The team decided to go a different route. People climbed up the stairs. As they exited the metro, they saw something strange, which clearly complicated the progress of the mission. Huge stems with thorns destroyed everything around. The monster was everywhere. The strangeness didn't end there. Velazar flew overhead. The squad was not at all happy about the dragon. They were not warned about such a strong enemy. The guy quickly realized that this creature was about Class Z. The guys were not ready for this. While people were thinking about the dragon, they forgot about other monsters, and the danger crept up unnoticed. Lyda grabbed the monster's stalks by the leg and lifted it up. The hostage asked the monster to lower him to the ground. The cannibal flower did just that, and the landing was not soft. The team began to carefully approach Brooks. They did not know if their comrade was alive. People were scared. They didn't understand what the hell was going on. Commander Dauman decided that it was a parasite, like those that appeared during the transformation of the dungeon back during training. If this place becomes a dungeon, then Seoul is finished. We need to solve the problem as soon as possible. However, the rescue team members did not even know if there was a way to stop it. At this time, the players were running away from the evil flower, which so wanted to snack on human flesh. Cadence moved away to a good distance, asking the other participants to move further away. Having activated the skill of Needle Frost, the protagonist rushed to attack. He decided to freeze part of the parasite, an area of Bermuda where many people have mysteriously disappeared. And apparently everyone was eaten by this creature. The entire territory of this sector was a place where dungeons appeared. These parasites must have affected not only the players, but also the monsters in the fair itself. Now, it seemed, Cook realized that he was in this tower, and the squad decided to go straight there. There is something like a greenhouse where these man-eating flowers grow. It will take a lot of time and many conditions for this place to turn into a dungeon. The squad still needs to hurry. They have to find the boss monster faster than the guys from the company do. If the players can defeat the main monster, the transformation process will stop. This is the only way to stop a new dungeon from appearing. Captain Marlowe decided to point out that the guys weren't trying. Even the rankers couldn't stop a transformation of this scale. First, they had to return to the Ark. However, players cannot afford this. Cadence is sure that those people from the company will definitely try to speed up the transition with the help of the dungeon flower. We must go right now. The squad is obliged to destroy the dungeon. The man-eating flower was too close to Audley. The player already thought that he would be eaten. The magic shooter could not allow the death of one of her comrades. Emily covered the guy by shooting straight into the monster's face. Cadence ran ahead, freezing the monsters, thereby clearing the way for his comrades. Francis and Little Luther came next, making sure that the remaining stems did not attack the squad. Afterwards, everyone else ran. The portal was just a stone's throw away. The main character found himself at his destination and stayed to wait for the others in case of an attack. Harley decided to go into the dungeon first. Cook asked the guy to be careful. Gibbs was worried about her friend. But the ranker had to make sure that every member of the squad was safe. Finally, Captain Carter was the last to run in, and now all his comrades were in the dungeon. Cadence decided to check. There was no one left. The fair was filled with cannibal flowers. The thorn stems headed straight for the ranker, wanting to finish him off. It's time for Cook to go to the dungeon and clear it out as quickly as possible. The guy was glad to say goodbye to the greenhouse monster, but the player didn't like it. A notification popped up saying that Cadence had discovered the secret greenhouse of the puppeteer Mary. Possession of the goblin hat is confirmed. The protagonist is led by an unknown stream. Cadence didn't understand at all what had happened. This had never happened before when passing through portals. Landing on her feet, Emily was puzzled. She found herself on the territory of the same fair. The girl went to look around. It seems the team was accidentally moved around the tower. Out of the darkness, an excited little Luther was running towards Gibbs. The goblin was seriously alarmed and asked Emily if she had seen the king. The kid demanded an explanation as to where His Majesty Cook had disappeared to. The gamer assumed that the ranker had been moved to another location, and she suggested that the goblin look for Cadence together. Gibbs asked the goblin if he was afraid, which put Luther in an awkward position. The kid got angry, but he was afraid of nothing. Nothing scares him. Luther is acting like a child. The goblin asked the girl to walk more slowly. Emily only now realized that she hadn't really communicated with the baby. Luther wasn't a monster to begin with. The gamer wondered if his memories had returned. The kid muttered under his breath that he was not a monster, but a proud descendant of a goblin clan. When Emily said she had never seen monsters become characters, Luther said he didn't remember or know anything. This strange situation made Gibbs wonder if the baby was asking to find Cook. Maybe Luther has some hidden quest he's trying to complete. Suddenly, the wall in front of the boys flew apart in different directions. Emily didn't know what was happening. Concrete shards were flying around. The dragon broke through the wall because he sensed people, not the best coincidence. Gibbs was seriously scared. She wouldn't be able to protect herself and Luther from Belazar. Suddenly, the Z-rank boss acted strangely. His head fell onto the concrete floor. Afterwards, the dragon completely disappeared from sight, leaving behind only dust. Apparently, Dark Carl dealt with the monster, but that didn't make the situation any easier. The copy of Cadence looked at the girl with soulless eyes. The character is clearly against the guys. There is nothing left to do but join the fight. Cook seemed to tell Emily that Velazar defeated the Dark Carl. This means that the revolver can easily cope with another copy of the legendary ranker. At this time, Cook was being pulled by someone's stream, and finally, after a long time of falling, he felt support. The guy found himself in an unknown place. There was only emptiness around. The entire floor, walls, and ceiling are painted white, like a drawing sheet. Even the shadow is not reflected, which means this place is the kingdom of the game. Suddenly, a voice rang out throughout the space, announcing the arrival of a precious guest. Cook grabbed the blade of regret and ran towards the sound. A man appeared in front of him. The main character was confused. The man was glad to meet him. Todd Freeman extended his hand to greet Cadence. Ranker didn't shake hands, so Todd decided to show one video first. A screen appeared out of nowhere. October 2nd, 2021, the first working day since joining the company. Todd had never been closer to his dream and promised himself to do everything he could. But life had its own plans, and he began to be late on his first day of work. Freeman was very nervous. No matter what he did, everything went wrong. He had to make 10 copies, but he made 100, and on the way home, he was driving during rush hour in the middle of a crush. The next day, Todd arrived at his workplace at dawn. It wasn't really necessary to come so early, but the guy wanted to be the best worker. Cadence found out the date. Apparently, that was the very day that Dreamworld opened the second. That's right. At 6 o'clock, Freeman entered the fair location. An unsuspecting guy was walking to work as usual and met Veselchak, the boss of the dungeon there. Todd had absolutely no idea what was happening and was frozen with fear. The boss immediately finished off the guy. At that moment, his only thought was that he had wasted his life on nonsense. However, the goblin ball, for some reason, Pierrot used it. In this way, the boss resurrected Todd, so the character became a puppet. Freeman was completely left without memory and could not feel anything due to the curse of the merry man. In addition, the boss gave the guy the ball, which saved Todd. The clown ordered to kill all the people who came to the fair and at that moment quietly disappeared. Welcome to the fair, a world full of hopes and dreams. Have a good time. And after that, people who came here found themselves in the night opening, and the fear that settled in their heads soon turned into monsters that haunted the survivors. But the real tragedy only occurs when those who survived finally realize what happened. They understood the main rule. Every time a new person arrived and the night shift began, another monster appeared. Because of this, every time someone new appeared, they took their life before darkness came. The problem was that in the end, they themselves died. Cook asked why the guy was showing him all this. Todd himself didn't know. Maybe so that they wouldn't forget about him. Maybe to prove that it wasn't his fault. Cadence asked the guy what he meant. Freeman replied that it was just the thoughts of a former employee named Todd Freeman. Afterwards, the character took the form of a bear and asked if Cook knew this doll, meaning that Todd was that very bear. It turns out that it was he who attacked the squad and escaped with the help of the ball. The doll that the players met was not Freeman at all. One could say that these were just cogs that made the fair work perfectly. The protagonist asked if the dolls were under someone's control. And by the way, only he knows Todd's true thoughts. The guy came to his senses about a month after the place began to look like this, wandering around the fairgrounds, and gradually began to understand what had happened. For example, that Todd died and then was resurrected, but he was just a thought tied to the ball and could not do anything. Every time the guy regained his memories, he would drag himself everywhere, trying to save the trapped people, but even that never ended well. But Todd was able to understand why there is no difference between day and night here. Veselchak likes to read the story of gloomy stories. Apparently, he loves the fear-filled moments that lead from a happy day to a terrifying night. It's such a strange hobby. He really enjoys watching people make extreme choices when they are struggling with pain. Every day, Freeman could feel all his emotions, which made the boy's hair stand on end all over his body. Todd was able to get through this pain and only 2 months later came to his senses, after which the narrator asked if he understood correctly that Carl was standing in front of him. The guy began to dissolve into thin air. There was little time. To escape from the shackles of the merry man meant not being able to exist even as a thought. Freeman asked Carl to do something, or rather, only he can do it. Since Cook already has the goblin hat, then this will be within his power. Todd handed Cadence the goblin orb. The protagonist couldn't believe that he was able to get the orb. Cook took possession of the goblin ball from Todd Freeman's thoughts. Now the ball belongs to the ranker. The title of goblin has been received. He has the right to make a royal engraving. First, you need to become the master of the ball. Then Cadence will be able to show his true powers. Freeman warned Mr. Carl that in order to defeat Mary, the artifact must be completely under the player's control. Also, if you get a chance to fight a boss, you can't close your eyes. You shouldn't even breathe near him. Finally, Freeman wanted to say something. He began to stutter. The guy's speech became intermittent. He was trying to say what would happen in the second dream world. Todd asked Mr. Carl to be wary of the regular updates that were carried out every year, according to the information he received from Veselchak. Cadence is in the greatest danger. Then Freeman disappears without finishing his sentence. The main character was confused. This meeting was very strange. At this time, Emily continued to fight with Dark Carl, the character deftly dodging bullets. The enemy struck right next to the girl, but she managed to jump back. The Dark Dwarf took out his daggers and decided to use them. Gibbs activated Eagle Eye to see the dagger's flight path, after which the girl gracefully dodged all of the enemy's attacks. Then the Dark Dwarf decided to use a fireball against the guys. Until the end, no one figured out what Cook's dark copy was doing. It's good that at least he's different from the real Cadence. That would have caused problems. He doesn't seem to be able to think straight, he just acts like a monster. Emily decided to test how invincible her opponent really was. The magic shooter activated the bomb skill and fired at the enemy. As it turned out, this maneuver did not cause much damage to the enemy. He was not bothered by anything. Then Emily activated the magic projectile barrage. I wonder how Dark Carl will dodge it. The guy parried most of the attacks with his sword. It seems the enemy is stronger than Cadence. But the enemy still remains a monster, unlike the real Cook. Although he has the skills of the original, he remains a dud. Time was up. Emily snapped her fingers, activating the explosive shells. The ceiling collapsed right on the enemy, and they not only knocked him down, but also dropped him onto the floor below. All that was left of Dark Carl was a broken sword and a hole in the floor. Having dealt with the fake, the guys went to look for the real Cadence. At this time, 2 people, Dylan and the drone, were running along the corridor of the fair. Someone was hunting them. It was another copy of Carl. I wonder how many of them are in the dungeon. The captain and Meg were running towards Audley, and surprisingly, Carl was also running behind them. Apparently, in this dungeon, instead of monsters, there are dark copies of Cook. Dylan asked the captain why their ally was hunting the squad. Carter replied that the monster didn't even look like one. But Marlowe himself said that Charles fought with the dragon Belisarius. Ranker caught all the monsters at the fair, including that dragon, so it seems it's time to catch players now. Ahead, in the darkness, Audley noticed someone walking towards the team. Emily was in the lead, but the team wasn't sure if she was really their ally, especially after the girl shot right next to Dylan's head. Audley realized that it was Mrs. Emily Gibbs. If it were a monster, it would not have missed. The girl hoped that she arrived on time. It was nice to meet someone other than Dark Carl. Cadence was trying to deal with the goblin ball, namely, to take possession of it. It seems it's time to brand myself to gain more power. The protagonist spilled his blood on the goblin ball. Now he is the owner of the item.